Chapter 239. For the entire night, the spirit serpent was in an extremely excited state. It kept talking and telling me about its growth experience. I didn't feel bored listening to it. In the end, I just ignored it and went to sleep. The spirit serpent then got rid of its excited state. It curled up on the dragon mark on my back and didn't say anything else. However, I still couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what had happened recently. However, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't understand anything. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, the fatty hurried to find me. He told me that his teacher, Immortal Guan, was going to perform an innate divination in the Tai temple. All the disciples of the temple had to go there. Since he didn't have time to play with me, he asked Yi Piampian and me to walk around by ourselves. Cultivators could endure loneliness much better than ordinary people. It wouldn't be a problem for me to stay in this room for 10 days or half a month. However, I was interested in the innate divination that the fatty was talking about. What's going on? According to the Book of Changes, the innate divination was the innate 8 trigrams. The 8 trigrams were divided into the innate 8 trigrams and the innate 8 trigrams. According to the legends, the innate 8 trigrams were created by the Fuxi clan 7,000 years ago. They were also called the Fuxi 8 trigrams. The innate 8 trigrams were created by King Wen when he was writing the Book of Changes. However, the fatty told me that the innate divination that Immortal Guan was performing wasn't the innate 8 trigrams. It was a secret technique of the divination sect. Its main function was to invite the sect's inherited magical tool to come out. I didn't understand it. Moreover, it was related to the fatty's sect's secret, so I didn't ask further. However, the fatty didn't look good. He seemed hesitant. Eventually, he took the initiative to tell me that his teacher wanted to invite the inherited magical tool for Nangong. To be precise, he wanted to give the inherited magical tool to Nangong. Now I understood why the fatty didn't look good. According to him, Nangong had come to the Tai temple halfway and had returned to the divination sect. To the people of the divination sect, Nangong couldn't be considered as a member of the sect. The inherited magical tool was the sect's most precious treasure. If it was given to a mysterious person, no one would be willing to accept it. Not only the fatty, but I also felt that something was wrong. After yesterday's events, I felt like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bough. I had a feeling that Nangong had come back to ask for the fatty's sect's inherited magical tool. Perhaps it had something to do with me. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad. I couldn't tell, but I had a strange feeling. Then, I asked the fatty, "What is the inherited magical tool of the Zhanshi school? How does it work?" In the end, the fatty shook his head and said, "I can't say what it is exactly. You should know about the pushback diagram, right?" I was startled when I heard the words pushback chart. This was the most marvelous book in the history of Chinese civilization. There was no one in the metaphysical world who didn't know about it. According to the legend, during the Tang dynasty, Li Chunfeng and Yuan Tiangang had received the emperor's order to predict the future. They had been immersed in the book for a while, and they had been able to predict more than 2,000 years of history. At the end, Yuan Tiangang had woken up and gently pushed Li Chunfeng's back, interrupting his deduction. Li Chunfeng sighed with emotion. That was how the name pushback chart came about. The pushback chart had 60 diagrams, and correspondingly, 60 prophecies and poems. It predicted all the major events that had happened in China since the Tang dynasty. It was enough to affect the history of the entire world. There were profound and abstruse parts that no one could understand. However, after these events had happened, the later generations would look at the pushback chart again. They would be surprised to find that there were no mistakes in the predictions. Every diagram and every prophecy was true and accurate. They had accurately predicted important historical events. Because of this, the pushback chart was called the most marvelous book of prophecy. Up until now, the pushback chart had only fulfilled 40 or so diagrams. There were still 10 or so diagrams that could predict the future. Regardless of whether it was in the metaphysical world, countless people were doing their best to study it, trying to predict the true meaning hidden within. Many people claimed that they had discovered a major event that was about to happen. However, there were many different opinions, and no one believed the others. Perhaps they would have to wait until the event had happened before they could go back and predict the future. Seeing that I was in a daze, the fatty continued, "You know that Li Chunfeng and Yuan Tiangang were the ancestors of my school. My master said that the inherited magical tool of our school was the one that the two ancestors used to predict the pushback chart." I was startled. From what he said, Li Chunfeng and Yuan Tiangang had used this magical tool to predict the pushback chart? One could only imagine the power of this inherited magical tool. What did Nangong want to do with it? Why did Master Guan insist on giving such a precious magical tool to Nangong, an unknown person? The most important thing was, did Nangong's actions have something to do with me? Before I could figure it out, the fatty waved his hand at me, asking me to inform Yi Pianpian. Then, he hurriedly left. After he left, I sat in the room and pondered for a long time with my brows furrowed. However, I couldn't find any clues. In the end, I gave up and went out to look for Yi Pianpian. When I arrived at Yi Pianpian's room, I briefly told her what the fatty had told me. Yi Pianpian didn't react and only nodded. Then, she said, "If that's the case, we'll stay in the room today and cultivate. After the battle with the old Taoists of Mount Longhu, our strength has increased. If we meditate, we might be able to make a breakthrough." I nodded and was about to turn around to leave. However, I hesitated and decided to tell her about what had happened last night. Ever since she had taken care of me for a month, I trusted Yi Pianpian and Grandpa Li, whom I had yet to meet. If it weren't for them, even if I didn't die, I would have been a cripple. I turned my head and told Yi Pianpian, "I saw Yi Pianpian last night." Yi Pianpian's face, which was as calm as an ancient well, suddenly changed. She opened her eyes wide and no longer had the slightest trace of indifference. She hurriedly asked me, "Where? Did she hurt you? Can you still find her?" Seeing her anxious expression, I hastily answered all her questions. "She's at the Tiangang Pavilion behind Tai Temple. Last night, Nangong asked me to meet him there. Unexpectedly, I saw Yi Pianpian with him. She didn't attack me and didn't say a word to me. I'm not sure if I can find her now." However, the fatty told me that his teacher wants to give the inherited magic tool of the sect to Nangong. I believe that Nangong hasn't left this place yet. If I go to him, I should be able to get some news about Yi Pianpian. After hearing my answer, Yi Pianpian was silent for a while before she lifted her feet to walk outside. I knew that she was going to find Nangong, so I hastily pulled her back and said with a wry smile, "The Tai Temple is currently holding a Xiantian divination. All the disciples are there, so it's not appropriate for us to rush in. It's better to wait until the ceremony is over before we go there. Nangong definitely won't leave in a short period of time. Don't worry." After much persuasion, Yi Pianpian was finally convinced and sat down again. However, I was puzzled as she sat there with her brows tightly furrowed and didn't say a word. From their appearances and names, she and Yi Pianpian were most likely twin sisters. However, from her usual behavior and current expression, they seemed to be irreconcilable enemies, especially Yi Pianpian. As soon as she heard Yi Pianpian's name, she looked like she couldn't wait to chase after her. I really couldn't understand this. I weighed my tone and carefully asked her about her relationship with Yi Maoan, and why she hated her so much. However, Yi Pianpian only shook her head and didn't say a word. Helpless, I could only shut my mouth and ask no more. I stayed in Yi Pianpian's room until the afternoon. 9 bell tolls came from the Tai Temple. It was obvious that the ceremony for the inheritance had ended. Yi Pianpian immediately left the guest room and rushed to the temple. I was afraid that something would happen, so I hurried to follow her. When we arrived at the gate of the temple, 2 young Taoists guarding the gate raised their hands and tried to stop us. However, Yi Piampian's strength wasn't something they could resist. She didn't even pause and directly rushed past the gate. I wanted to explain, but I was afraid that I would lose track of Yi Piampian. I had no choice but to follow her. Chapter 240. I thought that Yi Piampian would restrain herself after seeing Spiritual Master Guan, but to my surprise, she directly walked in front of Spiritual Master Guan and stiffly asked, "Where's Nangong?" Although Spiritual Master Guan and Yi Piampian were old acquaintances, she was startled by her attitude. She frowned and asked, "Why are you looking for junior brother Nangong?" Yi Piampian seemed to finally realize that she had lost her composure. After a moment of silence, she answered, "It's a private matter that I can't tell you in detail. I hope Martial Aunt Guan can help me." It was obvious that Spiritual Master Guan and Yi Piampian had a good relationship. She wasn't angry at this moment, and her expression became amiable. She pointed at the One King's Hall behind her and said, "Junior brother Nangong is still in the hall. The innate divination ceremony hasn't ended yet, so he won't come out until 3 days later." Yi Piampian raised her head and looked at the One King's Hall with an eager expression. However, she was still calm and just nodded, saying that she would wait outside for Nangong to come out. Spiritual Master Guan didn't seem to care and said with a smile, "It's fine as long as it doesn't affect junior brother Nangong's ceremony to obtain the magic tool." Yi Piampian nodded again and walked to the entrance of the hall. She crossed her arms and stood there, looking as if she was going to guard Nangong to the death. Spiritual Master Guan smiled and didn't say anything else before leaving with the other Taoists. Of course, the fatty didn't follow them. He quietly slipped out of the crowd and came to my side. With a puzzled expression, he asked me, "What's wrong with Yi Piampian?" I wasn't sure if Yi Piampian's secret was Yi Piampian's, so it wasn't appropriate for me to tell the fatty. I forced a smile and spread my hands, changing the topic. "Your master said that it'll take around 3 days. Let's go talk to her." The fatty and I went to Yi Piampian's side. Before we could talk to her, she said, "I'll stay here to watch over Nangong. You two search around the Yellow Crown Mountain and see if you can find her." Not only did I fail to talk to her, but I also added a difficult task to do. The fat man was hesitant. He wanted to ask something, but I hurried to pull him away. After we left King Wen's hall, the fat man shook my hand off and asked me with a puzzled face, "You two are acting so mysteriously. What are you doing?" I didn't want to talk about Yi Maoling before, but since Yi Piampian had mentioned her in front of the fatty, I didn't want to hide anything. I simply told him about Yi Maoling. After hearing this, the fatty's eyes widened in disbelief. He said doubtfully, "How is this possible? I've known Yi Piampian for 6 or 7 years, but I've never heard of her having a twin sister." I shook my head with a bitter smile. "Don't ask me. I've only seen Yi Piampian twice. I don't know what their relationship is, but this is obviously very important to Yi Piampian. We should try our best to help her." Then, the fat man took me to the Tai temple. We didn't find anything, so we left the temple. We walked along Mount Huangguanshan from east to west. We carefully looked around, but we still didn't find anything. When we returned to King Wen's hall, it was almost dawn. Yi Piampian was still standing outside the hall with her arms crossed. Not only did she not leave, but she didn't even change her position. The fat man tried to persuade her for a long time, but Yi Piampian didn't budge. In the end, we had no choice but to stay here and wait with Yi Piampian. Since we had Taoist energy, not eating or sleeping for 3 days wouldn't affect us much. 3 days passed quickly, but there was still no movement in King Wen's hall. Yi Piampian's frown deepened. She didn't stand still outside the hall anymore. Instead, she paced around the hall's gate. Sometimes, she lifted her head to look at the gate as if she wanted to break in. I felt something was wrong, so I whispered to the fat man, "Did your master lie to Yi Piampian?" The fat man felt a little guilty, but he still told me that Nangong was there when they left King Wen's hall. He saw it with his own eyes, so he couldn't be wrong. Another day passed amidst our suffering. On the morning of the fourth day, the continuous ringing of a bell finally came from Prince Wen's hall. The three of us were startled and turned to look at the hall's door, waiting in silence. Around half an hour later, the ringing of the bell finally disappeared. Then, we heard a squeaking sound from the gate. King Wen's hall, which had been closed for several days, finally opened. A figure wearing a plain Taoist robe walked out. It was Nangong. He was in good spirits with a strange smile on his face. He didn't look surprised when he saw the three of us waiting outside. He walked to the gate and looked at us with a smile. Yi Pianpian was the most impatient. She walked to Nangong and asked him coldly, "Where's Yi Pianpian?" Nangong's smile didn't change. He answered casually, "She should still be on Mount Huangguan. Why are you looking for her?" Before Yi Pianpian could answer, the fat man and I said in unison, "That's impossible. We've searched Mount Huangguan several times in the past few days, but we didn't find any trace of Yi Pianpian." Nangong curled his lip. "You two are much weaker than Yi Pianpian. Isn't it normal that you can't find her?" The fat man and I didn't know what to say. Yi Pianpian didn't mind. Her eyes didn't leave Nangong as she said, "Take me to see her." Nangong nodded straightforwardly and led the way out of the monastery. Yi Pianpian followed him without hesitation. The fat man and I exchanged glances and hurried to catch up with him. On the way out of the hall, I kept my eyes on Nangong. He had stayed in King Wen's hall for 4 days to retrieve the inherited instrument of the divination sect. However, I didn't find any trace of the instrument after staring at him for a long time. I didn't know if he had succeeded or not. After exiting the back gate of Extreme Celestial Monastery, we continued forward. It did not take long before we arrived outside the Heavenly Astral Pavilion, where I had met Nangong the other day. Nangong stopped and pointed forward. "There, Yi Marolan is there." I looked up and widened my eyes. Yi Pianpian was sitting on a stone bench in the Heavenly Pavilion, dressed in white. She was sitting in the same position as when I had seen her that night. She hadn't changed at all. It was as if she had been sitting there since that day. When enemies came face to face, their eyes turned especially red. It was still uncertain whether Yi Pianpian and Yi Maolan were enemies, but there was no doubt that their eyes were red. The moment Yi Pianpian saw Yi Maolan, she walked straight into the pavilion. The fat man and I were about to follow her, but Nangong stopped us and said with a smile, "This is between the two of them. Let's not go over there." As soon as he said that, Yi Pianpian stopped and turned around to say, "Don't follow me." Then, she hurried into the pavilion and sat down on the stone bench opposite Yi Pianpian. Due to the distance between us and the fact that the two of them were much stronger than me and the fat man, we couldn't hear their conversation. The fat man was quick-witted and took advantage of this opportunity to ask Nangong with a smile, "Martial Uncle Nangong, who is this Yi Pianpian?" Nangong chuckled and completely ignored him. He pulled me to the side and asked me, "Have you thought about it for the past few days? I forgot to tell you that after you absorb the energy into the vein of the heavens, you only need to have Jinren Guan set up a spirit-locking formation for you and place it on your jade bracelet. That way, the aura of the true dragon vein won't leak. Moreover, I've already told Jinren Guan about this. After he's done with it, he'll have Lin who send it over to you. You don't have to worry about this." I didn't have any secrets when facing Nangong, so I didn't find it strange at all. However, his enthusiasm made me even more vigilant. It's said that those who are unaccountably solicitous are hiding evil intentions. He was helping me with all his might for no reason. What was he planning? After hesitating for a while, I shook my head. "I'm timid and don't dare to take such a big risk. Wait until I have the ability to deal with the Celestial Master's pursuit before I consider raising this energy to the glorious knowledge realm." This matter seemed to be his weakness. After hearing my words, the smile on his face faded. He said with slight anxiety, "You have to think this through. If you reach the Celestial Master Realm with both types of energy, the Lu family definitely won't be your match. However, if you only rely on Dao Qi to reach the Celestial Master Realm, let alone Lu Ziang, even if you want to kill Lu Zining, who killed your parents, you'll have to spend at least a dozen years. Can you wait that long?" I have to say, Nangong found a very good reason. The Lu family's vengeance was my weakness. For the sake of revenge, I didn't want to wait a second longer, let alone a dozen years. Seeing that I was somewhat moved, Nangong struck while the iron was hot and continued, "I was at the scene on the day your parents were murdered. Lu Xining's cultivation was at most at the early stages of the Celestial Master Realm. If you follow what I said and cultivate both types of energy, when you become a Celestial Master, you can easily kill him. Even if you face Lu Ziang, you'll have the power to fight." His words stunned me. It wasn't because I was shocked at the power of cultivating both types of energy, nor was it because I was curious about the Celestial Master Realm. It was because Nangong said that he was at the scene on the day my parents were murdered. Although I was used to him knowing all of my secrets, this matter was completely different. My mind went blank. I extended my hand and grabbed Nangong's collar. I shouted at him, "Since you were at the scene, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you save my parents?" Chapter 241. With my current 9 acupoints sealed, Nangong could deal with me with one hand. However, Nangong didn't say a word even after I shouted at him. He only retracted the smile on his face and looked at me quietly. After shouting at him, I also felt that I had lost my composure. I abruptly let go of him and stood there in silence. Nangong finally spoke. "If you had been in danger, I would have definitely helped you. However, your parents, I have orders, so I have no right to interfere. As for the matter I just mentioned, you have to make your own decision." Then, Nangong turned and walked down the mountain along the small path. His figure quickly disappeared in the morning mist. After he left, the fatty hurried to my side and anxiously asked me, "What happened?" Although I knew that I was being unreasonable, I was still somewhat irritated. I shook my head and didn't speak. The fatty saw that my expression wasn't right and didn't speak either. He pointed at the Tiangang Pavilion and told me, "Yi Pianpian is back." After this incident, I had forgotten about Yi Pianpian's matter. I quickly turned to look in that direction. The scene of the two of them fighting as soon as they saw each other didn't happen. Yi Pianpian was still sitting on the stone bench in the pavilion, while Yi Pianpian stood up and walked towards us. Not knowing what had happened, the fatty and I quickly went to greet her. Yi Pianpian's expression seemed to be much better than before. She had regained her usual calm and indifference. Without waiting for us to speak, she directly said to us, "Let's go back." Then, she walked in the direction of the Tai Monastery. At this time, I turned to look at the Tiangang Pavilion and was surprised to find that Yi Pianpian's figure had disappeared. This scene shocked me. According to my deductions, Yi Marolin's strength was about the same as Yi Pianpian's. Although she was stronger than me, there was a limit to how much stronger she was. She shouldn't have been able to disappear without me noticing. I couldn't understand why, but Yi Pianpian and the fatty had already walked far away. I could only quickly follow them. When we returned to the back door of Tai Temple, a little Taoist boy was standing there. When he saw us, he hurried over and said to the fatty, "Senior Brother Lin, Master wants you to see him." After the fatty left in a hurry, Yi Pianpian also returned to her room without saying a word. I was the only one left. I had nowhere to go, so I returned to my room and sat cross-legged on my bed. Originally, I was preparing to adjust the Tao energy in my body, but after I sat down, I couldn't help but recall what Nangong had said to me. He said that he had his own orders and had no right to interfere with my parents' matters. Over the past few days, I had always felt that Nangong knew almost all of my secrets, and his every word and action seemed to be controlling me. However, after he said that, I suddenly felt that everything he did was against his will. Why was this happening? According to my calculations, he should have the strength of a celestial master. What kind of person could make a celestial master lose control? A few days ago, I had already felt that I was trapped in a big net. My every word and action seemed to be controlled by someone else. Now, this feeling was even clearer and stronger. Moreover, it seemed that I wasn't the only one trapped in that big net. The more I thought about it, the more chaotic my mind became. In the end, I could only shake my head and suppress these irritating thoughts. I focused on adjusting my Tao energy. No matter what, strength was the only thing I could rely on to protect myself. Yi Pianpian was right. After the battle with the Taoists from Mount Longhu, our realms had increased. I could even feel that I wasn't far from reaching the peak of the acupoint ceiling realm. If I worked hard these days, there would be hope for me to reach the peak of the acupoint ceiling realm. 1 hour passed in the blink of an eye. I guided the Tao energy in my body to complete a complete cycle. Just as I was about to continue cultivating, a warm current suddenly surged from my left wrist. It flowed along my arm and rushed toward my meridians. I was startled and quickly lowered my head to check. At this moment, the yin-yang symbol on the head of the Tao ghost seal on my left wrist had become much fainter. Even the entire seal had become a faint scar. As the Tao ghost seal became fainter, the warm current surged even more violently and crazily entered my meridians. I had experienced this process before. Moreover, I had received Nangong's reminder a few days ago. At this moment, I didn't panic. I focused on guiding the warm current to fuse with the Tao energy in my body and circulate it through my meridians. In the end, it gathered in my meridians and gathered in my meridians. Then, it rushed towards the last acupoint that hadn't been opened yet. This was different from using the Netherworld Ascension technique to open the acupoint. This time, I used the most primitive method, which was to stimulate the Tao energy in my body. When the Tao energy was concentrated to the limit of the acupoint's capacity, I forcefully opened the last acupoint. This method had a strong foundation, but the efficiency wasn't high. It required a lot of Tao energy. However, the Tao energy that was being converted from the Tao ghost seal was much more vigorous than I had imagined. There wasn't any stagnation at all. The last acupoint was opened in a few seconds. The surging Tao energy rushed into the acupoint. That wasn't the end. After a few seconds, the Tao energy had completely filled up the 10th acupoint of the heaven meridian. Only when the Tao energy had filled up the 10th acupoint of the heaven meridian would it be considered to have completed the acupoint ceiling. Normally, after opening the 10th acupoint, it would require a period of accumulation. However, the Tao energy in the Tao ghost seal contained all of the Tao energy of a glorious consciousness realm Earth Master. Not only did it easily fill up the last acupoint, there was still a large amount of Tao energy left. It continued to rush towards the other acupoints, giving me an indescribable feeling of swelling. This feeling was very uncomfortable. However, with Nangong Wei's reminder, I didn't give up on this portion of Tao energy. Instead, I endured the discomfort and continued to absorb it with all my might. At the start, it was still fine. However, as I forced more and more Tao energy into the acupoint, the swelling feeling turned into a piercing pain. It was as though there were countless steel needles flying around in my meridians at the same time, poking everywhere. Even with my current cultivation, it was so painful that I sucked in a breath of cold air. This process continued for another 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, the pain suddenly increased by several folds. It was no longer the piercing of steel needles, but the scraping of steel knives. It was as though there was a person in my meridians, holding a steel knife and cutting holes in the walls of my meridians. When the number of holes reached a certain level, I even felt that my heaven meridian could explode. This feeling was similar to the time when Lu Xening had destroyed my cultivation. At that time, he had sent an enormous amount of Tao energy from his body into my meridians. With just one circulation, my heaven meridian had cracked, and the Tao energy had no place to stay. It had directly dissipated. At this moment, the feeling was even more intense. It was likely that my meridians had gone through the process of collapsing and recovering, which made them more tenacious. Otherwise, they would have exploded long ago. I couldn't help but hesitate. Could Nangong's words be trusted? He wanted me to absorb all the Tao energy. Was he trying to harm me? I knew that if he wanted to harm me, he wouldn't choose this method. However, under the endless pain, I couldn't help but have this thought. I couldn't help but want to give up. However, just as I was about to reach my limit and was about to give up, the pressure in my acupoints suddenly disappeared. Then, the indescribable pain disappeared as well. It was as if another acupoint had appeared in my heaven meridian, absorbing all the excess Taoist qi. Before I could figure it out, the Tao energy that I hadn't had the time to squeeze into the acupoint forced its way in again. In an instant, the acupoint was full and the pain returned. This time, I was more experienced. I didn't want to give up. I endured the pain and persevered until the pressure in the acupoint disappeared again. The amount of Taoist qi sealed in the head of the Taoist ghost seal is much more than the amount of Taoist qi in the body. The last time it happened, my cultivation was raised to more than 2 acupores, close to 3 acupores. This time, the process of pain first and then disappearing happened 4 times. Calculating carefully, each time the Taoist qi was forced into the acupores, it was about 1 acupore's cultivation. In addition to the opening of the 10th acupoint in my heaven meridian, the Tao energy sealed in the head of the Tao ghost seal was enough to increase my cultivation by 5 acupoints. After 3 hours, the Tao energy in the Tao ghost seal finally disappeared. Inside my heaven meridian, there were 10 acupoints full of Tao energy. I had officially reached the consummate acupoint sealing completion realm. Not only that, when I tried to guide the Tao energy out of my body, all 10 acupoints of Tao energy came out. I didn't know where the Tao energy in my body came out, but 4 acupoints of Tao energy flowed out. Altogether, the Tao energy I could use was 4 more acupoints than an ordinary person who had reached the consummate acupoint sealing completion realm. Chapter 242. After standing up from the bed, I stretched. I felt my entire body calm and full of Tao energy. An indescribable sense of comfort enveloped my body. After reaching the perfect acupoint sealing perfection, the Tao energy in the heaven meridians would form a heavenly cycle that would rapidly circulate. As long as I didn't use too much Tao energy at once, I would be able to maintain the abundance of Tao energy in my body at all times. It was said that when a feng shui master was in this realm, they could enter a state of enlightenment at any time. They could absorb the power of the stars into their body and break through to the glory of knowledge realm. Of course, this was only a legend. Other than those great Daoxian experts in history, there were very few rumors of star picking. Especially in recent times, there were no records of it. At that moment, I recalled what Nangong had told me. If I cultivated the dark green power and broke through to glory of knowledge, I would definitely be able to pick stars into my body. The dark green power was already stronger than Tao energy. If I could pick stars and enter glory of knowledge, who knows how much stronger I would be. Just thinking about it made me yearn for it. It was impossible for me to say that I wasn't tempted, but the corresponding threat was too huge. Heaven Master and Earth Master were 2 completely different realms. At that time, even if my strength exceeded a normal glory of knowledge realm, it would be useless. As long as a Heaven Master wanted to kill me, I wouldn't be able to go against them. I sat on the side of the bed and pondered for a long time. In the end, I sighed and gave up on this unrealistic thought. Since I had reached the perfect acupoint sealing perfection, The next step was to consider glory of knowledge. Based on the rules of the Metaphysics Association, after reaching the perfect acupoint ceiling perfection, I had to report to the headquarters. Then, I would have to test my talent of the 5 elements and calculate the amount of bright stones needed. Then, I would have to wait for the Metaphysics Association to distribute the bright stones. Finally, I had to complete the final step of absorbing the bright stones to break through to glory of knowledge. During this time, the feng shui master couldn't leave the headquarters. This rule wasn't hard to understand. After all, bright stones were too precious. The Metaphysics Association wouldn't let the bright stones in their hands leak out. However, I was still worried about a problem. After the Metaphysics Exchange Conference and the trip to Meizhou, the Liu family would definitely know that I had recovered my strength. They would most likely want to eliminate me to prevent future troubles. If I were to return to the Metaphysics headquarters, I would be so close to the Liu family. The Liu family might get the news and cause some trouble. After thinking for a while, I decided to talk to Yi Pianpian about this matter. The one who saved me last time was Grandpa Li. With his identity and status, it shouldn't be a problem for him to protect me in the Metaphysics Union. It was just that he didn't know when he would return from the Fire God Temple. After making my decision, I got up and went to look for Yi Pianpian. She usually had a cold temperament. Now that she was in Mount Huangguanshan, she did not know many people. At this time, she was probably still cultivating in the guest room. I walked to her room and knocked on the door. However, no one answered. I felt a little strange, so I tried to use my Dao Qi to sense it. Although Yi Pianpian was powerful and I couldn't sense her realm, as long as she wasn't on guard, I could still sense her Dao Qi. After checking, I felt the Dao Qi in the room. Yi Pianpian should be in her room. However, when I knocked on the door again, no one answered. I frowned. Did something happen to Yi Pianpian? She was acting strange when she met Yi Maolan this morning. She didn't do anything at that time. Could it be that Yi Maolan had turned around and subdued Yi Pianpian? With this thought, I became anxious. I didn't have time to think too much. I pushed the door of Yi Pianpian's room open and rushed in. After entering the room, I was dumbfounded. Yi Pianpian was sitting on the bed. Her hands were holding the blanket in front of her body. She looked at me with a panicked expression. From her exposed shoulders, it seemed she wasn't wearing any clothes. I blushed in embarrassment. I stuttered and explained. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I thought something had happened to her. Yi Pianpian didn't blame me. She looked a little embarrassed. She stammered, "I was sleeping. I didn't hear you. You go out first." Of course, I didn't dare to linger. I hurriedly left the room and closed the door. However, I was puzzled when I got out of the room. With Yi Pianpian's realm, not to mention knocking on the door, even if I used my dark green energy to hide myself and quietly sneak to the door, I probably wouldn't be able to hide from her. How could she not hear such a loud knock on the door? Moreover, even if she was sleeping, she didn't need to take off her clothes and sleep naked, right? It was really strange. I leaned against the door and thought for a long time, but I couldn't figure it out. After that, the room was very quiet. I didn't know what Yi Pianpian was doing. 10 minutes later, a voice came from the room. "I'm fine, you can come in." I pushed open the door again and stuck my head out to take a look. Yi Pianpian was sitting on the chair beside the bed. I then walked in. At this moment, Yi Pianpian had already returned to her usual cold and indifferent appearance. There was no longer any trace of panic. After I sat opposite her, she faintly asked me, "What's the matter?" Although the two of us had known each other for a long time, and she had even taken care of me by my bedside for over a month, when we talked, she always spoke in a lukewarm tone. If I didn't know her personality, I might have thought that I had done something to offend her. I grinned and told her that I had reached the 10th acupoint and that I was going to the headquarters of the Metaphysics Society. Then, I asked her when Gramps Lee would return. If the Liu family didn't give up on harming me, Would it be dangerous for me to go to the headquarters? Ypiampian looked at me in surprise. You reached the 10th acupoint in such a short time? It hasn't even been a year, right? About that. Yeah. I nodded awkwardly. After all, Ypiampian was the most talented person in the Metaphysics Association before me. From sealing pressure point to glory of knowledge, she had used less than 3 years, which had already shocked everyone. Now that my talent had surpassed hers, even the time it took for me to break through had far surpassed hers. I felt a little guilty saying such a thing in front of her. Ypiampian didn't seem to mind. After a slight shock, she quickly regained her calmness. After thinking for a while, she told me, "Grandpolly needs around half a month, but you don't have to worry about the Liu family. As long as Grandpolly returns, you'll definitely be safe in the headquarters. No one dares to harm you, and no one can harm you." Her words were full of confidence. It was obvious that she had faith in Grampsley. I let out a breath of relief. If that was the case, then I had nothing to worry about. I nodded. That's fine. We'll stay on Mount Huangguan for a few more days. When Grampsley returns, we'll depart and return to the headquarters. Hearing my words, Ypiampian furrowed her brows and said, "Although you've reached the 10th acupoint, there's still a long way to go to complete mastery. Don't be impatient. Stay here and cultivate until you reach complete mastery. It won't be too late to leave for the headquarters then." I smiled embarrassedly and said, "Actually, I've already reached the complete mastery of my acupoint." Ypiampian was slightly shocked. She concentrated and looked at me in disbelief. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to ask something, but she didn't because it was my privacy. She only nodded and said, That's fine. Grandpolly will contact me when he returns. I'll bring you to meet up with them and return to the headquarters together. That way, we won't have to worry about the Liu family causing trouble." I was overjoyed. Grampsley had done me a great favor, but it was strange that I hadn't seen him after staying at his place for so long. It would be best if I could see Gramps this time. Also, the old Gramps had just returned from the Fire God Temple. He might even have a large amount of fire obsidian stones on him. If my 5 elemental talent was tested to be of the fire attribute, the old Gramps might not go through the Metaphysics Association and directly give me the fire obsidian stones. That would be great. After we agreed on this matter, I was about to say goodbye to Ypiampian. But before I left, I suddenly recalled Ypiampian's strange behavior, as well as her strange behavior when she met Yi Morin in the morning. I was a little worried. After hesitating for a moment, I opened my mouth and asked her, "Are you all right today?" I was just asking casually, but who knew that Ypiampian would suddenly freeze in place? She stared at me with her big eyes and 2 sparkling teardrops gushed out of her eyes. I instantly panicked. Ever since I met Ypiampian, she had always been arrogant and indifferent. Sometimes she could even be very strong. She had never shown any weakness. Why was she crying for no reason? Chapter 243. I stood there helplessly. I opened my mouth a few times, but I didn't know what to say. I was inexplicably nervous, and my palms were sweating non-stop. I finally let out a sigh of relief after Ypiampian lowered her head and wiped away her tears. I wasn't as nervous anymore, but the inexplicable panic in my heart still hadn't subsided. Ypiampian quickly recovered from her previous emotions. She lifted her head and even smiled at me. In a rare soft voice, she said to me, "I'm fine, you don't have to worry about me. After arriving at the headquarters, you might not be able to leave for a long time. If you have any matters to attend to, it's best to arrange them in the next few days to avoid any delays." I nodded in response. I was still worried about her, but her calm expression didn't seem fake. After a moment of silence, I wanted to ask her again, but I didn't know what to say. In the end, I could only say, "Then, take care of yourself. If you need any help, just come and find me." Ypiampian nodded at me with a faint smile. After leaving her room, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Yi Pianpian was a genius of the Metaphysics Association, and she also held the position of vice president. On the surface, she looked extraordinarily glamorous, but in reality, she was just a little girl about the same age as me. Moreover, after knowing her for so long, I had never heard her talk about her parent. It seemed that she had been with Gramps Lee since she was young, and there was also that mysterious Yi Piaolan who looked exactly like her. Although I didn't know what had happened to her, I could imagine that she must have gone through a lot. Perhaps her cold and arrogant appearance was just a disguise. She would only reveal her inner weakness when she couldn't bear the pressure, just like just now. On the way back, my heart was heavy. When I returned to my room, I was surprised to find that the door was open and the fatty was sitting in my room. Seeing my gloomy expression, the fatty asked me in surprise, "What's wrong?" I rubbed my face and smiled. I changed the topic and asked him why he was here. The fatty was always carefree, so he didn't probe further. He casually threw a small box on the table. "Here, my master told me to bring this to you. He said that you know about it. It's strange. Did you secretly meet with my master these past 2 days?" No. I was also confused. However, I recalled that Nangong had told me this morning that Taoist Seizing had made a spirit-locking formation for me. He said that it could lock the true dragon vein's aura. I guessed it was this formation. The fatty was puzzled and asked why his master had specially given me something. I waved my hand to quiet him down. Then, I walked over and opened the small wooden box on the table. Fatty was obviously very curious as well. He came over anxiously and stared at it intently. After the box was opened, there were 5 plain white shells that were smaller than a fingernail. Every single one of them was extremely smooth and looked very delicate. Moreover, they carried a strong wave of qi of the way, which could make people feel shocked. In addition, there was also a small piece of paper that was 2 fingers wide, folded together. I didn't see anything strange about the shell, but the fat man screamed in surprise. He stood up from his chair, his face full of disbelief. "What is this shell? Is it a formation?" From the fat man's expression, it was clear that he knew what it was. I hastily asked. The fat man calmed down and didn't answer me. He carefully picked up one of the shells with both hands and carefully examined it with an intoxicated expression. After a while, the fat man finally put the shell down. The intoxicated expression on his face didn't diminish in the slightest. He sighed and said to me, "That's right. This is a formation. Moreover, it's one of the strongest formations of our divination school." Although the divination school wasn't as widespread as the talisman school and the pill cauldron school, in terms of historical inheritance, the divination school could be said to be the strongest of all the Taoist schools. Moreover, the divination school was the best in the divination school. When I heard the fat man say that this was one of the strongest formations of the divination school, my interest was piqued. The fat man turned his head to look at the 5 shells. Then, he mysteriously asked me, "Have you heard of the 5 Emperor's coins?" 5 Emperor's coins? Isn't that a geomancy master's item? Of course, I've heard of it. The 5 Emperor's coins were one of the most common items in geomancy. They could ward off evil spirits, bring wealth, and pray for blessings. Since ancient times, Chinese people had the custom of wearing coins to ward off evil spirits, bring wealth, and pray for blessings. The 5 Emperor's coins were the coins made by the 5 most prosperous emperors in China. Thus, the 5 Emperor's coins gathered the qi of heaven, earth, and people, as well as the qi of more than 100 families. They could suppress evil spirits, bring wealth, strengthen people's will, and resolve distracting thoughts. Moreover, the 5 Emperor's coins were divided into the Great 5 Emperor's coins and the Small 5 Emperor's coins. The Great 5 Emperor's coins referred to the Qin Banliang, the Han Dynasty's 5 Baht, the Tang Dynasty's Kai Yuan Tong Bao, the Song Dynasty's Song Yuan Tong Bao, and the Ming Dynasty's Yongla Tong Bao. The 5 emperors' coins referred to the small 5 emperors' coins. Xuanji Tong Bao, Kongxi Tong Bao, Yongjing Tong Bao, Qianlong Tong Bao, and Jiaqing Tong Bao. However, these coins were made of copper coins, so what did they have to do with the 5 shells in front of us? After listening to me talk for a long time, the mysterious expression on the fat man's face became thicker. He waved his hand and said disdainfully, "What you're talking about, whether it's the 5 emperors' coins or the 5 emperors' coins, are things you geomancy masters use to check the geomancy of a house. They're not worth mentioning." I wanted to refute him, but after thinking about it carefully, what the fat man said made sense. Although I had seen Yang Shilong's copper coin sword, it had nothing to do with the 5 emperors' coins. In the end, metaphysics only separated from Taoism during the end of the Han Dynasty and the Jin Dynasty. Then, it evolved and became what it is today. In the end, it still couldn't compare to Taoism, especially the Transcendental School. The fat man's "not worth mentioning" was quite appropriate. I nodded and didn't say anything. I signaled the fat man to continue. The fat man smiled. "That's why I said that the 5 emperors' coins or the 5 emperors' coins aren't the real 5 emperors' coins. The Qin, Han, Tang, Song, and Ming dynasties are the 5 dynasties of the Han people, and they have the power of the founding emperors. They have the power to deter evil spirit. However, what are the 5 emperors' coins? Although the 5 emperors of the Tartar Empire stole the 9 cauldrons and had the power of an emperor, they could only fool ordinary people and disperse their yin energy. Even if they encountered a few wandering ghosts, they wouldn't be able to do anything. How can they be considered as the 5 emperors' coins?" I nodded. Although the fat man's words were vulgar, they made sense. The 5 emperors' coins borrowed the power of an emperor to increase its power. The 5 emperors' coins were not comparable to the 5 emperors' coins. What about these 5 shells? Are they more powerful than the 5 emperors' coins? The fat man snorted. "Aren't you just talking nonsense? Let me ask you, the so-called 5 emperors, which 5 are the most famous? Which 5 are the most powerful ones?" "The most powerful ones? Which emperor was more famous than Emperor Qin, Emperor Wu of Han, and Emperor Song of the Tang sect?" I didn't understand. The fat man continued to explain. "Third child, you're not smart enough today. Think about it. Although our Taoism originated from Old Zhuang, our inheritance dates back to ancient times. Taoism has many gods, and the most famous and powerful ones are the 5 emperors of ancient times. They are the Yellow Emperor, Zhuanxu, Emperor Ku, Emperor Yao, and Shun. The 5 emperors of ancient times became gods. How could Emperor Qin, Emperor Wu, and Emperor Wu compare?" I finally understood. The real 5 emperors' coins were the coins of the 5 emperors of ancient times. They didn't contain the power of an emperor, but the power of a god. As for why there were 5 shells, I didn't need the fat man to tell me. In ancient times, there were no copper coins in circulation. Most of the currency in circulation was these shells. According to the fat man, these 5 shiny shells with strong Tao energy were the 5 emperors' coins that had been passed down from that time. Chapter 244. When the fatty saw me staring at the 5 shells in a daze, he calmed down and asked me, "Third baby, after talking for so long, you still haven't told me why my master gave you such a precious formation." I extended my hand and took the jade bracelet off my neck. I asked the fatty, "Do you remember what I told you about the true dragon's vein?" The fatty nodded. "The true dragon's vein has an enormous dragon aura. You've felt it before. Even if I can store it in the jade bracelet, the enormous dragon aura won't be able to be concealed and will be easily discovered by others. Your master's formation should be called the spirit-locking formation. He gave it to me so that I could imprint it on the jade bracelet to conceal the true dragon's veins aura," I explained to the fatty. The fatty replied, "Oh." However, he immediately became suspicious and asked again, "Why haven't I felt the enormous dragon aura from before?" Even though I trusted the fatty, I couldn't easily reveal the dark green energy. I smiled and vaguely said, "I'm currently using another method to conceal it, but that method is the same as the formation you made last time. It can only temporarily conceal the true dragon's aura and won't last long. I'll have to use the spirit-locking formation to solve the problem." The fatty was magnanimous and didn't suspect anything. He nodded and received the jade bracelet. He smiled and said, "You don't know how to use our Jean-Surfaction's formation. Since my master told me to give it to you, he definitely wants me to imprint the formation on the jade bracelet. This is just right. I can also take the opportunity to study the 5 emperors' money." The fatty's expression became solemn and he sat cross-legged at the table. He held the jade bracelet in his left hand and the 5 shells in his right hand. He placed both hands on his knees and slowly closed his eyes. I held my breath and waited at the side. I thought that the fatty would do something, but after waiting for half an hour, he still maintained his previous motionless posture. However, his breathing became longer, as though he had entered a meditative state. After more than half an hour, a white light suddenly flashed in the fatty's right hand. The 5 shells rose into the air along with the light and slowly flew in front of him, hovering at the same level as his eyes. After the shell stopped, Fatty's left eye slowly opened. The pupil in his eye had already become a vertical line. When his eye opened completely, the vertical pupil separated from the middle, forming an upper and lower pupil. Although this wasn't the first time I had seen such a miraculous scene, I was still astonished. During the trip to the Fire God Temple over a year ago, I had just stepped into the dragon-seeking realm. When I saw the fatty's eyes, I didn't think much of it. However, at this moment I felt goosebumps all over my body. For some reason, I felt an extremely dangerous and terrifying aura from the fatty. It was similar to the feeling I had when I first saw the mysterious silver-eyed stone statue in the Fire God Temple. Enduring the discomfort, I continued to look over. After the 5 shells hovered in the air with the white light, each shell blossomed with a 5-colored brilliance. Moreover, the size of the 5 shells was much larger than the original size of the shells. Hovering side by side, they looked exceptionally beautiful. After the fatty's eyes opened, the 5 shells finally moved. They suddenly fell from midair, and when they landed on the ground, they turned into 5 balls of white powder and piled up on the ground. The 5 balls of 5-colored light in the air didn't fall, but continued to hover there and moved slightly. More accurately speaking, 4 of the light balls moved and surrounded the unmoving light ball. They followed a mysterious pattern and slowly spun in an irregular manner. At first, the speed was extremely slow, but it gradually sped up. In the end, it formed a plum-shaped light that looked even more beautiful. After a few minutes, the fatty's left eye changed again. The upper pupil turned from an oval to a round one, while the lower pupil turned from an oval to a crescent shape. This scene looked as though the sun and moon were hidden in his eyes. It looked extremely mystical, and even made people want to look up to him in admiration. As the sun and moon pupils formed, the 5 plum-shaped light balls rapidly flew towards the fatty's left hand, and finally landed on the jade bracelet before disappearing. At the same time, the fatty's left eye rapidly closed. After a few seconds, he opened both of his eyes at the same time. The sun and moon pupils' miraculous scene disappeared, and both of his eyes returned to normal. Even now, my heart was still filled with shock, and I was almost speechless. The fatty violently coughed a few times. After coughing, he looked as though he still had some lingering fear. He panted as he said to me, as expected of the 5 emperor's coins, "The power of a god can't be disrespected." I only checked it slightly, and something bad almost happened. "Here, the formation has been imprinted. You can try it. There shouldn't be a problem." As he said that, he stood up and handed me the jade bracelet. I took it and lowered my head to examine it. There was an additional 5-colored plum blossom pattern on the jade bracelet. Light swirled around it, and it looked extremely mystical. I didn't even need to test it. I could feel that this formation could conceal the true dragon's vein. Although the true dragon's vein was mystical, the spirit-locking formation that contained the power of the 5 emperors wasn't bad at all. I even felt as though I had used a butcher's knife to slaughter a chicken. It was such a pity that the 5 emperors' coins were only used for a spirit-locking formation. I didn't know what Nan Gong and Jinren Guan were thinking. After putting away the jade bracelet, I pulled the fatty and asked him about the sun and moon pupils in his eyes. In the Tao of divination, it wasn't rare for one's body to have a strange phenomenon when one was casting a technique. However, most people would only have a green patch on their forehead or an extra finger on their hand. It was nothing compared to Fatty's sun and moon double pupils. I thought that the fatty would proudly brag to me for a long time. However, I didn't expect that after I finished speaking, the fatty's eyes would widen and his jaw would drop. After a long time, he hastily asked me, "Are you sure you're not mistaken? My left eye has 2 pupils, but what about the sun and moon pupils?" After he said this, I was also dumbfounded. Could it be that it had never appeared before? Was this the first time it had appeared? After I described the situation in detail, the fatty nodded and said, "It has never appeared before. The sun and moon are part of the 7 luminaries. Moreover, they are the main stars. The power of the sun and the moon are extraordinary. It's definitely not something that can be compared to a simple pair of pupils." After he said this, my complexion became solemn. No matter if it was metaphysics or Taoism, the theory of mimicry was orthodox. Take the Tao of Feng Shui for example. When searching for the tomb of the dead, one doesn't need to look at anything else to know that it's an extraordinary treasure land. The fatty's Tao of divination was also the same. The sun and moon pupils could certainly borrow the power of the sun and the moon. It was very different from an ordinary pair of pupils. It couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. After the 2 of us discussed for half a day, the final conclusion was still related to the 5 emperors' coins. The fatty had just said that when he was imprinting the formation, he had studied the power of the gods within. It was most likely that the 5 emperors' divine power had brought about some strange change to his eyes. After deducing this result, I felt that using the 5 emperors' coins to imprint the spirit-locking formation was like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Just by looking at it, it triggered a change in the sun and moon pupils. Just how vast was the divine power of the 5 emperors' coins? Using it to conceal the aura of the true dragon vein was truly overkill. Combined with Nangong's previous mysterious behavior, I felt that I had been tricked by him again. However, even though it was a scheme, I couldn't see any harm in it. Thus, I didn't take it to heart. The fatty's sun and moon pupils were the same. Even though I couldn't understand the miraculous aspects, it was still a good thing. It would be of great help to the fatty's cultivation of the Tao of divination. Furthermore, the sun and moon were part of the 7 luminaries, which coincided with the glory of knowledge realm. Even though the Tao of divination didn't differentiate between the realms of a geomaster, this miraculous scene hinted that the fatty's power was advancing towards the glorious consciousness realm. After the discussion, the fatty said that he would report this matter to spiritual master Guan and see how his master would explain it. After saying that, he hurriedly left. At this time, the sky was already dark. After the fatty left, I prepared to sleep. However, I inadvertently saw the small wooden box from before. Only then did I remember that there was a slip of paper in the box. Just now, our attention was focused on the 5 emperors' coins, and we forgot about the slip of paper. I extended my hand to open the box and took out the slip of paper. When I opened it, I saw 2 rows of tiny words. Zhou, Wu, Zheng, and Wang are all preposterous. Desolate tomb, flesh mound, boundless Tao scriptures. Chapter 245. I held the slip of paper and studied it for a long time. Except for the first 4 words, I couldn't find anything special about it. What was more puzzling was that Nangong had sent me this note. But Immortal Guan wasn't related to me, and we hadn't even talked much. What did he want to do by sending me this note in secret? There were more and more mysteries surrounding me, and I felt a little numb. I folded the note and put it away. No matter what these words were hinting at, what would come would come. I just had to take it one step at a time. In the next few days, Immortal Guan didn't show up again. Every day, I would go with the fatty and Yi Pianpian to see the scenery around Mount Huangguan. When I had free time, I didn't cultivate my Taoist qi anymore. Instead, I went to the top of the mountain to sit cross-legged and look up at the sky to perceive the stars. Although picking stars was just a rumor, it was the dream of every feng shui master. I had the talent of 4 meridians that other feng shui masters didn't have, and the Taoist qi in my body was 4 apertures higher than that of ordinary people. My possibility of picking stars was higher than that of others. Unfortunately, a dream was just a dream. Half a month had passed, and I didn't even feel a wisp of the power of the stars, let alone picking stars. I wasn't discouraged at all. I just waited quietly for Yi Pianpian's news. Grandpa Li's situation didn't seem to be going well. After half a month, Yi Pianpian still hadn't sent me any news. After 1 month, she suddenly came to me and told me that Grandpa Li had returned to the headquarters. We should go there directly. I felt strange and asked her, "Didn't we agree to meet with Grandpa Li first and then go to the headquarters together?" Yi Pianpian looked puzzled. "I don't know. Grandpa Li contacted me a week ago and told me that he had left Shenangjia. He agreed to meet me on the way, but then he said that he had something to do on the way and it wasn't convenient for us to go there. He asked us to go back to the headquarters 1 week later." After listening to her, I couldn't help but smile wryly. I had felt that Grandpa Li was avoiding me on purpose, and now I was even more certain. Something to do on the way was just an excuse. He must have changed his mind after hearing that I was with Yi Pianpian. He had helped me so much before, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he was my savior, but why was he deliberately avoiding me? I couldn't figure it out no matter how hard I tried. In the end, I had to give up. I packed my luggage and went down the mountain with Yi Pianpian. At first, only Yi Pianpian and I were going to leave, but when the fatty heard that Mr. Li had come out of the Fire God Temple, he insisted on going with him. Left with no choice, we had to take him with us and go to see Immortal Guan to say goodbye. When we arrived, enlightened Master Guan personally received us, but when we left, he didn't show his face. He didn't even see the fatty. He only sent a little Taoist boy to bid farewell to us. After leaving Mount Huangguanshan, the fatty was depressed on the way to the capital. It was obvious that he was preoccupied with his father's matter. Yi Pianpian was still the same, quiet. As for me, I was thinking about glory of knowledge, so I didn't speak much. We stayed silent the whole way to the capital. After we got off the train in the outskirts of the capital, Mr. Li had arranged for 2 people to meet us at the train station. One of them was my old acquaintance, Yang Shilong, and the other was a middle-aged man, about the same age as Yang Shilong. The 2 of them stood there. Yang Shilong was half a step behind the man, and his expression was respectful. It seemed that this man's position was higher than Yang Shilong's. I was a little surprised. Yang Shilong was the vice president, and he seemed to be at the later stage of glory of knowledge. Although the Metaphysics Society was based on seniority, power was the biggest asset. This man's position was higher. Could he be at the Heavenly Master realm? Although I was thinking about it, I didn't rashly ask him. I just went over to greet him. Although this man looked calm and didn't look easy to get along with, he spoke calmly. He introduced himself as Chao Kuo, but he didn't mention his position in the Metaphysics Society. After leaving the train station, I was still worried about the Liu family. I wanted to go to the headquarters first. However, Yang Shilong and Yi Pianpian weren't in a hurry. They took me to have a meal first. Then, they got into Yang Shilong's business car and headed to the headquarters. After arriving at the headquarters, Yang Shilong and Chao Kuo quickly left. Yi Pianpian arranged for the fatty to rest first. Then, she took me to the Metaphysics Society's office. She told me that I needed to register according to the Metaphysics Society's rules. Then, I would be tested for the 5 elements. Then, I would be given a suitable amount of obsidian stone. I didn't have any objections and obediently followed Yi Pianpian's arrangement. After registering, I went back to call the fatty and followed Yi Pianpian to the house of Yi Pianpian and Mr. Li, where I had stayed the last time. The Lu family had several heavenly masters. If they wanted to kill me and used some sinister methods, it wouldn't be safe for me to stay in the Metaphysics Society's headquarters. That was why Mr. Li arranged for me to stay in his house and personally protect me. On the way, Yi Pianpian told me that it was Mr. Li's idea. After knowing this, I felt even more grateful to Mr. Li. At the same time, I was even more puzzled. He had always been nice to me, but he had always avoided me. I couldn't understand his behavior. When I left the last time, I guessed that Yi Pianpian's house was very close to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters. When I went there this time, I discovered that this small courtyard was on the mountain behind the Metaphysics Society. However, I hadn't seen the building of the Metaphysics Society's headquarters since we were separated by a mountain. This time, the fatty and I stayed in the same room we had stayed in the last time. From the decorations, it seemed to be Yi Pianpian's boudoir. However, I didn't understand why Yi Pianpian was staying here. If we were staying in her boudoir, where would she be staying? I pondered for a while and suddenly had a thought. Is this Yi Marolan's room? Yi Pianpian and Yi Marolan looked exactly the same. They were most likely twins. Yi Pianpian had told me that she had been with Mr. Li since she was a child. Yi Marolan had also grown up here. However, I didn't know what had happened, but the two of them had become mortal enemies. That night, Yi Pianpian had finished cooking and delivered it to us. The last time I had stayed here for more than a month, it had always been Yi Pianpian who had cooked for me. However, I was muddle-headed at that time and couldn't remember the taste of the food. This time, after eating, I realized that Yi Pianpian's cooking skills weren't bad. She had cooked a few ordinary home-cooked dishes, but they tasted delicious. This skill wasn't something that could be practiced in a short period of time. This greatly changed my impression of Yi Pianpian. I used to think that she was a fairy that didn't belong to this world. But now, after several dishes, she looked more like a mortal. I felt closer to her now. After eating, Yi Pianpian told me that during the trip to the Fire God Temple, Grandpa Li had brought back the giant blazing stone. Besides the part with the words carved on it, which had been dug out to be used for research, the other parts had been given to the headquarters to be used by the Style Navy when they were studying obsidian. Due to the large amount, the metaphysical families that belonged to the Metaphysical Society also wanted a share. They would come to the headquarters in a few days to discuss the distribution of the stones. Hearing this news, I instantly felt unhappy. Originally, I wanted to use my relationship with Gramps Li, as well as my contribution in discovering the Fire God Temple, to get more blazing stones. However, from the looks of it, I could only wait for the headquarters to distribute them. In this way, even though they had the care of elderly, the obsidian stone was too precious. It was unknown how much they would get. As for the metaphysical families wanting a share, I didn't think much of it. Everyone in the world was after benefit. The metaphysical families had deep foundations. There were many things that the Metaphysical Society needed to rely on. When it came to benefits, they naturally had to take a step back. I just hoped that the metaphysical families wouldn't go overboard so that it wouldn't affect me getting enough blazing stones. After that, Yi Pianpian stopped Fatty. She said that Grandfather Li had asked her to bring a message to him. During their trip to the Fire God Temple, they had indeed found some traces of human activity. It seemed that someone had entered before them, but danger lurked everywhere. Their main goal was still the fiery obelisk, so they didn't go too deep. They didn't see anyone, and they didn't find any clues about Fatty's father. After hearing this, the Fatty's face instantly showed disappointment. After staying silent for a long time, he finally nodded and didn't say anything. After Yi Piampian left, I looked at the depressed Fatty and was worried that he would do something extreme. I took the initiative to talk to him. "Uncle Lin, the heavens help you. You survived such a serious matter last time. Even if you really entered the Fire God Temple this time, you'll most likely be fine. Don't be anxious. After I finish learning Yao, I'll accompany you to the Fire God Temple." Chapter 246. After the agreement, the Fatty promised me that he would stay here for the next few days and wait for me to break through to Glory Consciousness realm. He wouldn't go anywhere else. Only then did I relax. For the next 3 days, I stayed in the small courtyard and waited for news. It wasn't until the evening of the 4th day that Yi Piampian finally sent news. She said that the great metaphysical families had arrived at the headquarters and had already discussed how to distribute the blazing stones. It was related to my interests, so I asked Yi Piampian, how much did the headquarters get in the end? The metaphysical aristocratic families didn't snatch too much, right? However, Yi Piampian's expression was a little strange. She shook her head and said, "The specific amount is not yet decided. It depends on your performance." I was bewildered as I didn't understand what she meant. Yi Piampian immediately explained, as for the specific distribution method, the metaphysical families debated for several days, but they couldn't come to a conclusion. In the end, President Gu suggested that the 9 families should each send a person who has reached the peak acupoint realm, while the Metaphysical Union would send 3 people. There would be a total of 12 people. They would hold a competition and distribute the obsidian stones according to their ranking. Of course, the participants will receive a 10th of the obsidian they obtain. It took me a while to understand what she meant. I pointed at myself and asked, "You mean, I'm one of the 3 candidates for the Metaphysics Society?" Yi Piampian nodded. "You have top 4 meridians talent and happen to be at the pressure acupoint perfection realm. Naturally, there will be a spot for you." I knew that it wouldn't be easy to obtain obsidian stones. I had to rely on myself to obtain them. However, this method also had its benefits. The participants could obtain a 10th of the obsidian stones they obtained. This meant that if I obtained first place, I would definitely obtain a lot of obsidian stone. After asking Yi Piampian about the details, I learned that the Metaphysics Union had obtained a total of about 800 pieces of blazing stone, and each piece was exactly one person's share. The Taoist and metaphysical schools had thousands of years of inheritance, so they had a very good understanding of blazing stone. They had long set a standard amount. The so-called one person's share was just enough for a feng shui master to break through to the glorious knowledge realm. The weight was about 5 kilograms. Because of the high density of obsidian, 5 kilograms sounded like a lot, but in reality, it was only the size of a fist. Of course, due to the different talents and physiques of feng shui masters, 1 obsidian stone per person was only the general standard. Generally speaking, 3 obsidian stones were enough for anyone who could sense astral power to break through. According to the agreed method, there would be a total of 12 participants from the 9 great metaphysical families and the 3 from the Metaphysical Association. The top 12 would each receive 10 to 120 obsidian stones. As for the participating feng shui master, he would receive 1 to 12 obsidian stones. It was hard to say if the person in 12th place had enough bright stones, but the person in first place had a total of 12 pieces, so it should be enough. Furthermore, the participants this time are all at the acupuncture point perfection realm. Based on my experience during this period of time, not to mention the acupuncture point perfection realm, I have the confidence to defeat even those at the early and middle stages of the glorious memory realm. Even though the prodigies of the metaphysical families were much stronger than ordinary people, I still had the confidence to obtain first place. After thinking for a while, just as I was about to speak, Yi Pianpian persuaded me again. When you are at the acupuncture point perfection realm, you have 4 meridians. When you are at the glorious memory realm, there is a high possibility that you will have talents of the 5 elements, so you will need many kinds of obsidian stones. It will be very difficult for the metaphysical association to satisfy your needs alone. The quality of the blazing obsidian stone this time is extremely high. If you have the need, you can easily exchange it for other kinds of obsidian stones. Her words made me interested. I had never heard of exchanging obsidian stones before. After asking, I found out that due to the special nature of obsidian stones, in the metaphysical world, it was almost equivalent to a hard currency. No matter if it was a metaphysical family or an ordinary high-rank feng shui master, they would always keep a few pieces of obsidian stones on hand if they had the chance. Between these high-rank feng shui masters, there would often be transactions of talismans, magic tools, etc. Normally, these transactions were done through barter. However, the value of the item wasn't constant, so when bartering was impossible, they would use obsidian stones to purchase it. Therefore, obsidian stones had a large amount of circulation in the metaphysical world. Exchanging fire obsidian stones for other types of obsidian stones couldn't be any easier. After understanding, I nodded and said with a smile, "All right, I'll try my best to get a higher ranking so that I won't delay my glory of knowledge." However, Yi Pianpian shook her head. "You have to get first place. You have 4 meridians. Under the most ideal situation, you can detect 4 types of power of the 5 elements. 3 obsidian stones are needed to ensure that one type of power of the 5 elements breaks through to glory of knowledge. 4 types is exactly 12 pieces. You can't be careless about this." 5 elemental talents were related to one's strength after attaining glory of knowledge. Within the same rank, a feng shui master with 2 types of power of the 5 elements would definitely be stronger than a feng shui master with only 1 type of power of the 5 elements. This was something that everyone in the metaphysical world knew. However, this was the first time I had heard of the theory that 5 elemental talents were related to the acupoints opened by attaching acupoints. After a series of inquiries, I found out that 5 elemental talents were completely determined by the acupoints opened by attaching acupoints. With 1 meridian, only 1 type of elemental talent could be revealed. With 2 meridians and 2 meridians, 2 types could be revealed. Based on this, I had 3 meridians and 5 acupoints, so the best possibility was for me to reveal 4 types of elemental talent. From the looks of it, I really had to do my best to get first place. Of course, I still didn't feel any pressure. At this moment, Yi Pianpian said, "In terms of strength, although the people from the aristocratic families of metaphysics are strong, their talents are far inferior to yours. It's unlikely that they'll be your match in the same realm. However, I have to remind you that this competition concerns the interests of the 9 great metaphysical families. Moreover, it's also a chance for you to display your strength. The people sent by the aristocratic families will most likely have various heavenly master rank artifacts and high-level talismans that can increase their strength by a lot. Under the influence of these external forces, you won't just be competing in terms of strength, but also the foundations of the aristocratic families." A bucket of cold water was poured over my head, causing my heart to instantly sink. Heavenly master rank artifacts were still manageable. A feng shui master who had reached the peak of attaching acupoints might not be able to display much of their strength, but high-level talismans weren't to be trifled with. All of their power was stored within the talisman and could be activated as long as there was Dao Qi. In layman's terms, it was like a hand grenade. It was a one-time use item. As long as the fuse was pulled, a 3-year-old child could use it with the same power as a special forces soldier. Scarlet talismans were still manageable, But if purple talismans that could only be made by people in the glorious consciousness realm, or even silver and gold talismans that could only be made by people in the heavenly master realm appeared, then it wouldn't matter how strong I was. I quickly asked Yi Piampian. This time, I'm representing the Metaphysics Association to participate in the competition. The Metaphysics Association has to do something, right? We can't just tell the horses to run and not eat grass, right? Yi Piampian nodded. The Metaphysics Association will naturally provide you with something, but you have to be mentally prepared. After all, the Metaphysics Association can't compare to the aristocratic families of metaphysics. It's hard to say how much they can provide you with due to the conflict of interest. I was momentarily speechless. The metaphysical world was originally a place far away from the hustle and bustle of the secular world, but the Metaphysics Association was a bureaucratic organization. From the looks of it, it wasn't any different from the secular world. Perhaps it was because she saw that I was discouraged. Yi Piampian quickly comforted me. You don't have to worry too much. The Metaphysics Association won't do anything, but Grandpa Li definitely won't. Just watch the fiery obsidian stones fall into the hands of the aristocratic families. I'll tell Grandpa Li about this later, and he'll definitely talk to President Gu. Yi Piampian seemed to have confidence in Grandpa Li, but I didn't have much hope. Grandpa Li's status was high, but from the fact that he allowed the Metaphysics Association and the aristocratic families to discuss how to distribute the fiery obsidian stones, it was clear that he didn't want to meddle in the affairs of the Metaphysics Association. Furthermore, bureaucracy wasn't something that could be solved by a single person, even if that person was the highest leader. I nodded and smiled wryly. All right, let's not talk about this for now. When will the competition start? And who will the other aristocratic families send? Have you already confirmed all of these? Yi Piampian nodded. The time is set for 3 days from now. As for the people sent by the aristocratic families, there are a few that you're familiar with. Familiar? How could there be people I'm familiar with in the aristocratic families? Without waiting for me to ask, Yi Piampian continued. Han Wenan from the Han family of Qinling Mountains, Zhang Kunlun from the Zhang family of Mount Mang, and Lu Zhenyang from the Lu family of the capital will all be participating. Chapter 247. Puzzled, I couldn't help but ask Yi Piampian. Their talents aren't as good as mine, so why are their cultivation speeds so fast? Hearing my question, Yi Piampian was stunned for a moment, then the corners of her mouth rose slightly. She smiled and said, within the pressure point realm, cultivation speed doesn't have much meaning. It's said that it takes 3 years to search for the dragon and 10 years to seal the acupoint, but metaphysical aristocratic families have their own methods to strengthen their Dao Qi. Regardless of talent, as long as they are willing, they can quickly reach pressure point perfection. This isn't rare. On the other hand, you've always been cultivating alone, yet you can maintain this speed. It's really extraordinary. After hearing her words, I became even more puzzled. I hesitated for a moment before asking, then how long did you take to reach pressure point perfection from the Dragon Qi baptism? Yi Piampian said indifferently, 6 months. My mouth gaped open. It seemed that I had misunderstood her. I had thought that she had taken at least 1 or 2 years to complete the young phoenix gathering from the last one to the current one. I hadn't expected that she had only taken 6 months. This speed really made me blush with shame. Yi Piampian seemed to be a little emotional at this moment. She continued, 6 months complete, 3 months glory of knowledge. From then until now it's been a full 3 years. I'm only at the intermediate stage of glory of knowledge. Within the pressure point realm, cultivation speed doesn't have much meaning. After glory of knowledge, it's different. Other than the obsidian stone, there's almost nothing that can affect cultivation speed. Everything depends on talent. At that time, those metaphysical aristocratic families won't be able to catch up to you. So that's how it is. Looks like I'm ignorant and ill-informed. All along, I've been cultivating alone. Although I can understand the general knowledge of metaphysics from the death scripture, the death scripture has its limitations. It can't be truly all-encompassing. When it came to these common-sense things, I was far inferior to Yi Pianpian and the others. Taking this opportunity, I asked Yi Pianpian what she meant by 6 months complete, 3 months glory of knowledge. She reached pressure point perfection in 6 months, but why did it take another 3 months to reach glory of knowledge? Yi Pianpian told me that although one relied on obsidian stone to obtain star power during glory of knowledge, a geomancer had to first comprehend a trace of star power. It was like a talisman. It needed Tao Qi to guide it to activate the power within. Comprehending astral power required a process, and many people could even spend several years in this process. Moreover, not everyone could attain glorious knowledge after obtaining the obsidian stone. Some people would never be able to sense star power in their entire lives. Back then, Yi Pianpian had taken 3 months, which was already considered very fast. Furthermore, she was a 3-vein geomaster. When she was at glory of knowledge, she had successfully awakened 3 of the 5 elemental talents. With every additional 5 elemental talent, she would need more time than others. In reality, she had only taken a month to advance from sealing acupoint perfection to glory of knowledge. This speed was shocking. After telling me about her experiences, she specially told me that I might awaken 4 of the 5 elemental talents, so the time needed to awaken glory would definitely not be short, so I shouldn't be in a hurry. I smiled and nodded. The more elemental talents I awakened, the stronger I would be in the future. I naturally wouldn't be in a rush. After talking about these matters, it was already getting late. Yi Pianpian bade farewell and left. Before she left, she told me to take care of my body for the next few days. 3 days later, when the competition starts, she would come to fetch me. After she left, the fatty, who had been quietly listening to our conversation, said to me with an envious expression, "You people who practice the mountain arts have such good lives. Each of you have extraordinary power. People like us who practice the Tao of divination are powerless. What glorious knowledge, what astral power, they have no fate with us. Our lives are truly bitter." Regardless of whether it was Taoism or Xianmen, there were mountain, medicine, divination, the 5 paths. Of course, this was just an ancient saying. Nowadays, the Tao of medicine was almost impossible to find. Divination, these 3 had completely merged. Regardless of whether it was Xianmen or Taoism, there were probably only mountain and divination left. Of course, nothing was absolute. Perhaps there were still medicine inheritances that had been passed down in the world, but I had never had the chance to see them. Although the school of metaphysics was also proficient in divination, generally speaking, as long as one reached the Earth Master realm, they would belong to the mountain art. In Taoism, no matter if it was the Talisman faction's Celestial Master sect, Maoshan sect, or the Danding faction's Chuanjin sect, they all belonged to the mountain art. Simply put, as long as it was a battle technique, it was a mountain art. The Taoism that practiced mountain arts were the mountain art. Although the fatty's lament seemed reasonable to him, it was just moaning without any illness. Ordinary people who practiced the Tao of divination might not have any fate with power. They would be powerless for the rest of their lives. However, the fatty was extremely talented. In the future, he would definitely reach the Celestial Master realm. As for those who practiced the Tao of divination, once they reached the Celestial Master realm, they would be completely different from before. Their power would be far beyond that of ordinary people who practiced the mountain art. Take the fatty's divination sect's founder Yuan Tiangang, Li Chunfeng, and the others as examples. Which one of them wasn't an almighty expert? Even without mentioning the heavenly master realm in the future, with fatty's current Tao of array formations, he was far from having the strength to truss a chicken. Previously, when he faced the few old Taoists from Mount Longhu who were in the glory of consciousness realm, Fatty's array formation had firmly blocked them outside, and they could not even take a step in. I disdainfully argued with the Fatty for a long time, but he just kept crying. His lazy and scoundrelly character really infuriated me. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the morning of the 4th day, Yi Piampian drove over to pick me up. We went to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters together. Originally, this competition was the Metaphysics Society's internal affair. Moreover, it was related to the distribution of the obsidian stones. Everything was strictly confidential. However, the Fatty dragged me and Yi Piampian to watch the competition. Eventually, Yi Piampian couldn't change his mind and agreed to bring him along. As the vice president of the Metaphysics Society, and backed by Grandpa Li, Yi Piampian's position in the Metaphysics Society wasn't ordinary. Bringing someone to watch the competition wasn't a big deal. Then, the three of us got in the car and went to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters. When we arrived, I quickly saw the other 2 participants of the Metaphysics Society besides me. One of them looked unfamiliar. He wasn't young, was tall and thin, and had a sickly face. Yi Piampian introduced him as Li Enqing. The other young man was called Zhou. He looked familiar. I tried to recall and remembered that I had met him at the Young Phoenix gathering. He was a member of the Shandong branch. He had woken up a moment before Zhang Wenfei. His innate talent was the same as Zhang Wenfei's. He had 8 apertures in one meridian. When I saw him, I couldn't help but think of Zhang Wenfei. If nothing had happened to him, he would have reached the peak of the acupoint ceiling realm. Perhaps his name would have been on the Metaphysics Society's list of participants. It was a pity that the heavens were jealous of such a talented person. This time, Lu Zhenyang would also be participating. Although he had lost an arm, it didn't affect his cultivation much. In a short year, he had reached the peak of the acupoint ceiling realm. Good people don't live long, while scourges live for 1,000 years. This sentence was the most suitable to describe Zhang Wenfei and Lu Zhenyang. At that moment, I suddenly thought of a problem. Would I meet Lu Zhenyang again in the competition? Lu Zhenyang had 3 meridians and was the direct descendant of the Lu family. He definitely wasn't weak. It was possible that he would go far in the competition. If I wanted to get first place, the probability of me meeting him was high. During the previous Young Phoenix gathering, Lu Zhenyang had provoked me many times. I was apprehensive of the Lu family's power. Even if it was a life-and-death battle, I didn't dare to be ruthless. It wasn't until the last Young Phoenix gathering that I used my dragon-seeking realm to deal with his acupoint ceiling realm, that I used all my power to break his arm. Up until now I was filled with regret. There were many times when I thought back. If I had killed him, would the Lu family only target me and wouldn't my parents be implicated? Hypothetically speaking, there would never be an answer. Thinking too much about it was pointless. However, the situation this time was different from the last time. I was a lonely person without a father or mother. I had a rotten life that even the heavens and earth couldn't spare. I no longer had any apprehensions. If I really met Lu Zhenyang, I would definitely use my full strength. However, the chance of killing him wasn't high. Back in Meizhou, Zhang Canwen and I worked together, but we couldn't do anything to Lu Qingping's life-saving artifact. As the direct descendant of the Lu family, it was impossible for Lu Zhenyang to not have any life-saving methods in this competition. Thinking about that, I coldly smiled. So what if he had a life-saving method? No matter how strong it was still an external power. It could only be used when his life was in danger. If I didn't kill him, I wouldn't activate his life-saving method. I would only cripple his cultivation and turn him into a cripple. He would have a taste of what I felt like back then. Chapter 248. As I thought about it, I didn't show it on my face. After I talked to Li Enqing and Zhou Yu, I pulled Yi Piampian to the side and asked her, "It's impossible that the Metaphysics Association doesn't know about the grudge between me and the Lu family. Lu Zhenyang and I will be participating in this competition. Isn't the Metaphysics Association worried that something might happen?" Yi Piampian shook her head. "Of course, the Metaphysics Association is worried. But when we decided to let you participate in the competition, we had a discussion. Everyone felt that you and Lu Zhenyang are on par. It might be easy to determine the winner, but a life-and-death battle would be difficult. That's why we arranged for you to participate in the competition." I was stunned by her answer, but I understood after thinking about it. I knew that I was stronger in terms of absolute power and Lu Zhenyang was stronger in terms of external power. It would be difficult to fight to the death. The people from the Metaphysics Association were much stronger than me, so it wasn't strange for them to see that. However, they probably didn't know that not only was my 4 meridians more talented than Lu Zhenyang, but I also had 4 extra apertures of Dao Qi and the true dragon vein that could recover Dao Qi at any time. Most importantly, ever since Zhenren Guan had sealed the jade bracelet with the spirit-locking formation, I had absorbed all of the dark green power into my body. The dark green power didn't have much effect on Qin Yangding's Heaven's Lightning, but that didn't mean that it wasn't powerful. In fact, the reason why I was able to defeat Han Wen'an and Lu Zhenyang during the Young Phoenix gathering was because of the weak dark green power in my body. Now, all of the dark green power in the black bead had been absorbed by me into the 10 apertures of the Heaven's Meridian. In terms of quantity, it was almost the same as the Dao Qi. Back then, a faint trace of dark green energy had been mixed into the Taoist Qi, and it had been able to exert such great power. This time, what kind of power would the dark green energy that had completely filled the 10 apertures of the heavenly meridian be able to exert? Even I didn't know. This was the reason why I had the confidence to cripple Lu Zhenyang. Even if Lu Zhenyang had external help, as long as his power didn't exceed the Celestial Master Realm, I was confident that I could deal with him. So, after hearing Yi Piampian's answer, I was actually quite happy. If the people from the Metaphysics Association thought this way, then the people from the Lu family would also think the same way. They wouldn't put up much of a defense. If I really crippled Lu Zhenyang, who knew how wonderful their expressions would be? After thinking for a while, I asked Yi Piampian, "If, and I'm just saying if, I kill Lu Zhenyang or severely injure him, the Lu family definitely won't let this go. What will the Metaphysics Society's attitude be?" At this moment, Yi Piampian suddenly raised the corner of her mouth. She stared at me with interest for a while before saying, "I knew you would ask this. I can't be sure about the attitude of the Metaphysics Association. They will definitely protect you, but it's hard to say how much they will protect you if no one stands up for you. However, there is one person whose attitude I am very clear about." I didn't quite understand what she meant and asked curiously, "Who?" Yi Piampian raised her head slightly, her usual proud expression instantly appearing on her face. "Grandpa Li. Yesterday, he told me that if you didn't look for me today, it would be fine. However, if you came to ask me this question, I have to answer you with one sentence. Life and death in the arena depends on one's own ability. You don't have to worry about anything else. He will be there." I was stunned at first, but then I felt ecstatic. Grandpa Li's words obviously meant that I didn't need to worry about anything. Even if I killed Lu Zhenyang, he would still be able to stop the people from the Lu family. Originally, I was alone. Now that I had Grandpa Li's guarantee, I grinned and didn't have any worries in my heart. I thought that this was the biggest surprise of the day, but unexpectedly, after Yi Piampian finished talking, she took out a small mahogany box and handed it to me. "I told you the other day that the support of the Metaphysics Association wouldn't be that great. After that, I went to find Grandpa Li and wanted him to supervise President Gu. However, Grandpa Li didn't do that. He just asked me to bring this wooden box to you, saying that you can use it in the competition. After saying that, Yi Piampian seemed to be in a good mood. She wore a faint smile and joked with me, which was rare. I'm a little jealous of you now. Grandpa Li doesn't treat me as well as he does you. I couldn't stop smiling. Grandpa Li was at the Heavenly Master realm, so the things he gave me wouldn't be any worse than those from the metaphysics families. During the competition, I was only worried that the people from the metaphysics families would use external objects. Now that I had an external object to rely on, the last trace of worry in my heart disappeared. I couldn't wait to open the wooden box to see what was inside, but Yi Piampian stopped me. There are too many people here. It won't be too late to look at it when I find a place with fewer people. I nodded and didn't insist. Besides me, Yi Piampian, and the other 2 contestants, there were also a few directors and vice presidents of the Metaphysics Association. They were all at the glorious knowledge realm. The item in the wooden box had a very strong fluctuation of Tao energy. I could faintly feel it through the wooden box. If I took it out, it would be hard to avoid being noticed by others. After explaining everything, Yi Piampian stood up and left. She said that she wanted to look after the fatty to prevent him from causing trouble in the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. Not long after Yi Piampian left, Yang Shilong walked in and called Lianqing, Zhou Yu, and I over. He gave us a small jade box each, saying that there were a few powerful talismans that the Metaphysics Association had specially prepared for us. He hoped that we could get a good ranking in the competition. Then, he said that the competition wasn't just for the Metaphysics Association to fight for the obsidian stone, but also for ourselves. Of course, I didn't take his words to heart, but the small jade box in my hand surprised me. Yang Shilong didn't mention what kind of talismans were inside, but from the appearance of the jade box, it was even more exquisite than the wooden box that Grandfather Li had given me. It looked quite pleasing to the eye. However, I was instantly disappointed when I opened it. There were only 3 scarlet talismans inside. Moreover, from the inscriptions on them, they were 3 defensive talismans. Yang Shilong continued to say, "The talismans in your hands are called merit-summoning talismans. You can see the color of the talismans. They are all scarlet talismans that are at the glorious knowledge realm. The 3 of you are the chosen members of the Metaphysics Association, so your talents and strength are the best of the best. In this competition, you can be said to be outstanding in terms of strength. The only thing you need to worry about is the various treasures in the hands of the other metaphysics aristocratic families. Now that you have the merit-summoning talismans, you just need to block the treasures that the metaphysics aristocratic families are relying on. I believe that the final winner will be the 3 of you." After saying those polite words, Yang Shilong let Lianqing and Zhou Yu rest first. Then, he walked in front of me and said to me with a smile, "Zhou Yi, I've heard about your performance in the Metaphysics Exchange competition with the Nanyang Taoist sections. In this competition for the Obsidian Stone, our Metaphysics Association's hopes are all on you. The other 2 will only get 2 of the Scarlet Talismans, and you will get 3. I wish that you will get first place in advance." I resisted the urge to pout and smiled at him, casually brushing him off with a few words. After he left, I looked at the 3 scarlet talismans in my hand with displeasure. I didn't know what Lianqing and Zhou Yu were thinking, but I felt that the Metaphysics Association was too much. The scarlet talismans weren't weak, but they could only use the power of the glorious consciousness realm. In this competition for the obsidian stone, which metaphysics aristocratic family wouldn't be eyeing them covetously, they wanted me to get first place with just these few scarlet talismans? That was just wishful thinking. Moreover, the distribution of the scarlet talismans made me want to ridicule them. There were a total of 12 people participating in this competition. According to the competition schedule, the final champion would have to fight 4 rounds. The Metaphysics Association's plan was obvious. The 3 of us participating shouldn't use the scarlet talismans in the first round, so we could pass with just our strength. In the second and third round, we should use the Scarlet Talismans to win. All three of us would get a good ranking. As for me, who they had pinned their hopes on, I might reach the last round, so they gave me an extra talisman. I had to admit that the higher-ups of the Metaphysics Association were daydreaming. I didn't have much hope for the Metaphysics Association, so I wasn't disappointed. Since I didn't have anything to do, I found an excuse to go to the toilet. After I entered, I carefully took out the wooden box that Grandpolly had given me. After opening the lid, an intense aura surged out. I was so shocked that I hastily used my dark green power to cover my surroundings. Only then did I heave a sigh of relief and look into the wooden box. There were 2 talismans placed side by side inside. The inscriptions on them were abnormally complicated. They were several times more complicated than any talisman I had seen before. The strokes were natural and contained an indescribable rhythm. Just by looking at them, one couldn't help but be intoxicated. Chapter 249. Silver Talismans. Talismans were divided according to power. There were a total of 5 colors from strongest to weakest: gold, silver, purple, red, and yellow. Normal feng shui talismans, and those below the Glory of Knowledge realm, were all yellow talismans. At the Glory of Knowledge realm, one could make powerful red talismans. As for the strongest gold and silver talismans, that was the monopoly of Sky Masters. Purple talismans were a different type of talisman. Although they were of a higher rank than red talismans, their power was hard to say. This was because these purple talismans were sets of talismans and not made up of individual talismans. Some purple talismans were made up of yellow, red, silver, and even gold talismans. Their power was even stronger than gold talismans. However, these kinds of talisman sets were very rare. Most of them were passed down in places like Dragon Tiger Mountain. In reality, these kinds of talismans were rarely seen. The Death Scripture had many ways to make purple talismans. Back then, when I moved Chief Lu's grave, I made a small deception talisman. It was one of the purple deception talismans. As for the extremely powerful silver talismans and golden talismans, although they could only be made by the Celestial Master realm, there was a huge difference between them. Normally, after reaching the Celestial Master realm, most people could make silver talismans, but not golden talismans. Only those who had a deep understanding of the Tao of talismans and had a cultivation base that reached a higher realm among the Celestial Masters would have a chance of successfully making golden talismans. Their power was extremely terrifying, but they were extremely rare. Even the Metaphysics Society and Dragon Tiger Mountain might not have a few gold talismans, let alone the feng shui families. It was almost impossible for it to appear in our pressure point completion realm battles. It was impossible even for the obsidian stone, because the value of gold talismans was far higher than obsidian stone. In other words, in this competition, the highest that could appear was a silver talisman. An elderly had given me 2 silver talismans in one go. I was almost certain that no one in this competition would be my match. Sitting on the toilet bowl, my heart was filled with excitement. After a while, I finally calmed down. I carefully held the silver talismans in the wooden box and closed my eyes. I carefully used my Tao Qi to sense the Tao intent contained in the silver talismans. Although the silver talismans were strong, I had to at least understand their use before using them. After comprehending for a while, I quickly sensed an extremely sharp aura from the first talisman. There was no doubt that this was an offensive talisman of the metal attribute. There was an extremely powerful offensive Taoist technique sealed inside. Just by comprehending it with my Taoist Qi, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was obvious how powerful it was. As for the second silver talisman, there was no need to comprehend it. There was a line of words clearly written on it: Thunder City General Marshal Ma Talisman. It was a Celestial Master Sex 36 Heavenly General Talisman. Its function was similar to the Mao Mountain Sex Mao Mountain Talisman. However, the Mao Mountain Sect's Mao Mountain Talisman was very random. Even a superior Mao Mountain Talisman might not be able to invite a truly powerful heavenly god or heavenly general. The 36 Heavenly General Talisman was much more precise. The one in front of them was the talisman used to invite Martial Ma. Martial Ma was the Lord Ma that the people often spoke of. There was a common saying, "Don't you know that the Lord Ma has 3 eyes?" This was referring to one of the 36 heavenly generals of Thunderclap City, Martial Ma. According to the legends, Lord Ma was one of the 28 constellations in the sky, the Sun Horse of Star. However, in the Taoist memorial tablets, Lord Ma's official name was Spirit Official Martial Ma, also known as the Three-Eyed Spirit. The 36 heavenly generals of Thunderclap City were divine generals with peerless heavenly power. It wasn't hard to imagine the power of summoning them. The value of this talisman was even higher than the metal attribute talisman, with an extremely strong attack power. I was very satisfied with these 2 silver talismans. The only thing I was puzzled about was why Mr. Li, the patriarch of the Metaphysics Society, had a talisman from Mount Longhu. It was really strange. However, I guess that Mr. Li had exchanged them with someone from Mount Longhu. I didn't think too much about it. After putting the 2 silver talismans away, I left the bathroom and returned to the room I had stayed in. When I returned, an unfamiliar member of the Metaphysics Society was waiting for me. When he saw me, he hurried to tell me that the competition was about to begin. He asked me to hurry. Lianqing, Zhou Yu, and I followed the member to the hall where the Young Phoenix gathering had been held. When we arrived, the other members of the metaphysical families had already gathered in the hall. The participants were standing by the platform, and the seats below were filled with people from the Metaphysics Society and other families. I saw Lu Zhenyang standing by the platform. He seemed to be staring at the door. When I noticed him, he also stared at me. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. However, this time, he was much calmer than before. He didn't take the initiative to talk to me. Instead, he wore a cold smile on his face. His left hand, which was missing his forearm, scratched his neck. It was obvious that he was provoking me. I just smiled at him and didn't reply. Instead, I turned around and looked at the seats below. As soon as I turned around, my eyes shrank. Lu Zhenyang called third grandpa Lu Zining. He was sitting in the first row with Yang Shilong and the others. Lu Zining, who was in the Sky Master realm, was also there. His expression was much calmer than Lu Zhenyang's. When I looked at him, he only glanced at me before looking away. It was obvious that he didn't care about me. I also quickly looked away. I clenched and relaxed my fists. After a few times, I finally relaxed. Lu Zhenyang was hateful, but Lu Zining was even more hateful. He was the one who killed my parents. My hatred for him wasn't any less than Lu Zhenyang's. However, I had no choice but to hide my hatred. He was a Sky Master. I had a good chance to take revenge on Lu Zhenyang during the competition. However, against a Sky Master like Lu Zining, I didn't know when I would get the chance to take revenge. I might not even be able to do it in my entire life. Thinking about that, the excitement I had when I saw the 2 silver talismans disappeared. I clenched my teeth and urged myself. I must quickly study Yao and reach Sky Master as soon as possible. Every day I thought about the Lu family's vengeance was another day of torment in my heart. After a long time, I finally calmed down. I didn't look at Lu Zining anymore and threw him to the back of my mind. At that moment, on the platform, President Gu personally drew lots for the 12 participants. Then, he announced the result. The 9 aristocratic families of the Metaphysics Society were Qinling Han family, Mount Mangzhang family, Beijing Lu family, Qingduyang family, Lu Liang Lai family, Jinling Su family, Kaifeng Bao family, Xiangyang Lu family, and Hui Zhouchen family. These aristocratic families were either located in famous historical cities or Taoist Holy Land. However, from the names of these families, It was obvious that none of them were easy to get along with. I didn't care about how the other people were grouped. I only remembered that I was grouped with Hui Zhou Qin family's Qin Yadong. Hui Zhou was an ancient name that was no longer used. Its main jurisdiction included the present-day Huangshan City, Xian City's Jishi County, Jiangxi County's Wuyuan County, and other places. It could also be considered a famous historical city. However, more importantly, there was Mount Qiyun. In ancient times, it was called White Mountain or Cloud Mountain. It was a famous place of the Chuanjian sect and was one of the 4 famous mountains of Taoism. Since the Chun family was a famous family, it was normal to have a family like the Chun family. Although Huizhou was famous, and Mount Qiyun was even more famous, compared to the other aristocratic families, Chun Yadong was the weakest. My luck wasn't bad. After the lots were drawn, no one had any objections, and soon, the competition officially began in accordance with the order. Coincidentally, Chun Yadong and I were assigned to the first mat. Under the gazes of the crowd, we walked to the platform and began the first match of the competition. Although Chun Yadong's power was the weakest, even a lion would use its full strength to capture a rabbit. I didn't dare to be negligent and steadily took out my heavenly fan and yin-yang yama luo brush. While I prepared my defense, I tried to lure the yin and yang fishes to attack. Chun Yadong was also testing the waters at the start. He only used his magic tool to fight against me. However, even if I didn't use the dark green power, my Tao energy was still more than half of an ordinary person's. Soon, Chun Yadong showed signs of defeat. Without any other choice, he took out a red talisman. After receiving the Tao energy, he took advantage of the gap between the magic tool's attacks and threw it at me. This talisman was completely different from the one that the Metaphysics Association had given me. It was a true attack talisman. The Tao energy condensed in midair and formed an enormous flame. It carried boundless heat as it charged towards me. Chapter 250. I didn't dare to be negligent and used my Tao energy to sense it. I could tell that the Scarlet Talisman was only at the early stage of glorious knowledge, close to the middle stage. From its power, it was about the same level as the few Taoists from Dragon Tiger Mountain that Yi Pianpian and I had fought against. With my current power, I could block this attack by myself if I used the dark green energy and the golden light divine incantation. However, after thinking about it, I gave up on this idea. It was obvious that the metaphysical aristocratic families had put in a lot of effort in this competition. Even though I was confident that I would be the final victor, the process wouldn't be easy. I had to hide my true power as much as I could. I definitely couldn't let the people below the stage see through my true power. Of course, this was also related to the fact that the 3 scarlet talismans in my hands weren't very valuable and were the most common scarlet talismans. If they were rare talismans with special effects, I naturally wouldn't waste them. Returning to the main topic, when Chun Yadong used the scarlet talisman to form a huge ball of fire, I quickly took out the merit summoning talisman that was distributed by the Metaphysics Society. I rubbed my hand and quickly guided my Tao energy into it. The scarlet talisman instantly turned into ashes, leaving behind a white ball of light. It left my palm and floated in front of me. It quickly grew in size, forming a man in a red robe, white pants, and boot. He held an axe in his hand and a long sword hung at his waist. A wooden plate hung around his neck with the words "Straight Sun" written on it. He was the Merit Summoning Day of the 4 Merit Summoning Day. Merit Summoning Day was the name of a minor official. It was the same in the human world and the heavenly court. After a feng shui master reached the glorious knowledge realm, he would have the power of the stars and could communicate with the god. Using the talismans, he could invite the gods to descend to the human world to assist him in battle. Of course, the star power of the glorious knowledge realm was low, so he could only command the minor gods, such as the Merit Summoning Day, the Guardian Temple, the 6 Dingliojia, and the 5 revealing truths. The guardian temple and the 5 revealing truths were the gods of Buddhism. It was the monk's method to command them. In terms of Taoism and metaphysics, the most common were the merit summoning day and the 6 Dingliojia. Fourth duty merit officials are divided into 4 positions: day duty, month duty, year duty, and time duty. Their abilities are the lowest, and the most commonly seen one is the day duty merit official that I summoned this time. Don't look at how he stood there with a hatchet in his hand and a long sword at his waist, looking majestic and awe-inspiring. In reality, this was all to scare people. In reality, the merit supervisor on duty had 2 roles. The first was to serve as an errand boy for the mighty figures of the heavenly master realm to make talismans for the heavens to hear. Secondly, when he was summoned in a battle at the glory of consciousness realm, he would act as a meat shield. He would stand there, not speaking or moving, only taking hits without attacking. He would absorb the opponent's firepower until his spiritual body was scattered, and then he would return. Naturally, the one I summoned didn't show any abnormalities. It just stood there obediently, allowing the ball of fire to descend upon its body. After being roasted, the ball of fire and the merit officer on duty disappeared at the same time. The 2 scarlet talismans cancelled out their effect. After that, Chun Yadong was also very straightforward. He knew that he wasn't my opponent in terms of strength and external items, so he directly admitted defeat and left the stage. I won the first round easily. After President Gu personally went on stage to announce the results, I went to rest. Afterwards, the other 8 great metaphysical families, as well as the Metaphysics Association's Li Enqing and Zhou Yu, took turns to fight. Besides Li Enqing and Zhou Yu's 2 battles that were a little anxious, the other 3 battles all ended cleanly. After the first round, there weren't any dark horses. On the side of the metaphysical families, the victors were Han Wennan, Lu Zhenyang, Zhang Kunlun, and Su Kuan from the Su family of Jinling, whom I hadn't seen at the Young Phoenix gathering. On the side of the Metaphysics Association, Li Enqing and I won. Zhou Yu, who had the same talent as Zhang Wenfei, was unlucky and met Lu Zhenyang. Lu Zhenyang was much calmer than before. He knew to hide his strength during the battle, so he didn't use much of his Dao Qi. He only used scarlet talismans one after another. Zhou Yu, who only had the 2 merit-calling talismans given by the Metaphysics Association, was powerless to resist, and was forcefully thrown off the platform. It was already noon. After everyone had rested, Yi Pianpian drove me and the fatty back to the small courtyard. In the afternoon, the ranking of the 6 people who were defeated would be decided. It had nothing to do with me, so there was no need to waste time there. The night passed uneventfully. On the morning of the second day, I rushed to the Metaphysics Association. The rankings of the 6 people who were defeated yesterday had already been decided. I glanced at the rankings and didn't care about the others. I only noticed that Zhou Yu from the Metaphysics Association was ranked last. In terms of strength, Zhou Yu was carefully selected by the Metaphysics Association. His strength wasn't any weaker than the others. It was a pity that the Metaphysics Association only gave him 2 scarlet talismans, and he also met Lu Zhenyang yesterday. Even though the current Lu Zhenyang's way of doing things had become much steadier, his ruthless nature hadn't changed in the slightest. In the battle yesterday morning, he'd successively used numerous scarlet talismans to force Zhou Yu off the arena, and at the same time, he'd heavily injured Zhou Yu. This had caused Zhou Yu to suffer a crushing defeat in the afternoon battle. Everyone from the Metaphysics Association had ugly expressions on their faces. Yang Shilong purposely came to look for me and Li Enqing. He said that Zhou Yu had failed to live up to his expectations and that the Metaphysics Association's hopes for the blazing stones were now on me and Li Enqing. He wanted us to do our best and not be careless. His words made me pout. Zhou Yu had an 8 meridian talent. In terms of strength, even though he wasn't as strong as Lu Zhenyang, he wasn't much weaker than the others. He shouldn't have lost so badly. It was a pity that the Metaphysics Association only gave him 2 merit talismans. It was fine if he couldn't stop Lu Zhenyang, but he couldn't even protect himself in the end. Yang Shilong's failure to live up to expectations was unfair. Of course, I only cursed in my heart and didn't communicate with Yang Shilong at all. In this competition, the Metaphysics Association and I were just using each other. I was only interested in the first place, the 12 blazing stones. I wasn't the least bit interested in the Metaphysics Association's glory. After Yang Shilong finished his long-winded speech, he took out 2 more scarlet talismans and passed them to me and Lianqing respectively. Yesterday's battle was very intense. The Metaphysics Association underestimated the difficulty of the competition, so the talismans they gave you were a little shabby. These 2 talismans were made by me, and I'm giving them to the 2 of you privately. I hope that you can use them today. I lowered my head to sense. The grade of the scarlet talisman that was made by the glorious consciousness realm wasn't high. I could easily sense the type of talisman. The 2 scarlet talismans were earth-terminating talismans. It was one of the strongest defensive talismans among the scarlet talismans. Depending on the abilities of the person who made the talisman, it could summon 3 to 9 rays of earth-terminating qi to protect the body. This surprised me, and my opinion of Yang Shilong changed a lot. Even though the Metaphysics Association had given me 3 scarlet talismans, their total value couldn't be compared to the earth-terminating talisman. Moreover, even though the scarlet talisman wasn't much, in actual fact, the materials needed to make the scarlet talisman were astronomical. The earth-terminating talisman was a powerful talisman that could only be made in the later stages of the glorious consciousness realm, so its value wasn't low. Yang Shilong actually took out 2 of them under his own name. His attitude was much better than what the Metaphysics Association had done previously. What was more precious was that the competition concerned the benefits of the participants and the Metaphysics Association. It had nothing to do with Yang Shilong's benefit. From this point alone, it could be seen that Yang Shilong, as the vice-chairman of the Metaphysics Association, definitely wasn't doing nothing. He was wholeheartedly working for the Metaphysics Association's benefit. I had known Yang Shilong for quite some time and always felt that he was a peacemaker. During the Young Phoenix gathering, when I was being suppressed by Lu Zhenyang, he didn't speak up for me at all. He had always been trying to smooth things over, so I didn't have a good impression of him. After this incident, my impression of him had changed a lot. Now that I thought about it, even though we knew each other, we didn't have much of a relationship. During the Young Phoenix gathering, it was already kind of him not to help Lu Zhenyang deal with me. I really couldn't ask for more. After putting away the earth-terminating talisman, Lianqing and I thanked Yang Shilong. Then, we followed the director of the Metaphysics Association to the venue from yesterday. We had arrived a little early today, so the people from the Metaphysics aristocratic family and the Metaphysics Association hadn't arrived yet. However, the 6 participants of the competition had all arrived. After the Young Phoenix gathering, Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun were considered old acquaintances of mine. After seeing me enter, the 2 of them came over to greet me. Zhang Kunlun was a little fatty. He had a cheerful smile on his face, but his words were still a little distant from me. Han Wennan and I might have gotten to know each other through a fight. Even though his face was cold, his words were much more intimate. It was a pity that this fellow was a cultivation maniac. When he spoke, his words were always about cultivation and realms. As he spoke, he also strongly expressed his desire to exchange pointers with me again. From what he said, he seemed to have made some progress in the past year. He felt that his strength wasn't any weaker than mine. In the end, I made an agreement with Han Wennan. If the 2 of us met in the competition, we wouldn't use any talismans and would only use our cultivation to fight. Han Wennan was from the Han family of Qinling Mountains. He was probably too rich and overbearing, so he didn't care about obsidian stones. I couldn't be so free and unrestrained. The reason why I agreed was because I was certain that I was invincible among those who had reached the pinnacle of the acupoint pressing realm. As for Zhang Kunlun, he shook his head without hesitation in the face of Han Wennan's invitation. He said that his family had given him an important task. If he didn't get a good ranking, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. He smiled and refused Han Wennan's suggestion. While we were chatting, Lu Zhenyang stood not far away. He coldly pursed his lips and looked at us with a sinister expression. Han Wennan didn't pay attention to him. I didn't know what Zhang Kunlun was thinking. He specially reminded me, I'm afraid that the person from the Lu family has some ulterior motives. If Brother Zhou were to meet him, you should be more careful. I heard that Brother Zhou comes from a poor family. Even though you are representing the Metaphysics Association, you and I both know that the Metaphysics Association won't provide much support. If Brother Zhou needs it, I have 2 silver talismans here. I can lend them to Brother Zhou to use. It won't be too late to return them when Brother Zhou advances to become a heavenly master. His words stunned me. I almost thought that I had heard wrongly. Chapter 251. Before I could figure it out, Han Wennan, who was standing to the side, suddenly said, I also have a few silver talismans here. If Brother Zhou needs them, you don't have to borrow them and just take them. Before I could recover from my shock, Han Wennan dropped another bomb. He didn't lend them to me, but gave them to me. Could it be that the Death Scriptures records were wrong? Were silver talismans that worthless now? Zhang Kunlun, who had been smiling, smiled even more. He looked at Han Wennan and said meaningfully, The Han family lives in the bitter cold of the Qinling Mountains. I'm afraid they don't have many silver talismans. Brother Han is really generous. Han Wennan still had that honest and slow look, but he quickly replied, The Qinling Mountains are remote and cold. It's indeed not as comfortable as your MT Mang, but my Han family has been around for 1,000 years. As long as Brother Zhou asks, not to mention silver talismans, my Han family can even take out gold talismans. The more they spoke, the more excessive they became. It was silver talismans just now, but now they even took out gold talismans. I reckoned that even a heavenly teacher wouldn't be able to take out gold talismans, yet these 2 spoke so calmly. The shock on my face didn't disappear, but I slowly understood. The reason why these 2 were presenting their treasures in front of me wasn't because they had too many talismans to use, but because they wanted to rope me in. To be more accurate, it was the Han and Zhang families behind them that wanted to rope me in. After the young phoenix gathering ended and I revealed my apex 4 meridians, Han Wennan came to find me. The other metaphysical families also sent people to contact me. However, I had just revealed my apex, so the metaphysical families didn't have high expectations for me. When they contacted me, they only asked about my intentions. The biggest promise they made was to tell me that they would provide for all my cultivation needs in the future. It was different this time. Zhang Kunlun and Han Wennan immediately gave out silver talismans. Of course, silver talismans were just an excuse to hint to me that as long as I joined their families, I could ask for any conditions I wanted. After understanding this, I hastily pulled back the 2 of them who were about to start fighting. I smiled wryly and said, Silver and gold talismans are too precious. Moreover, they probably won't be used in this competition. I appreciate your good intentions, but in the future, if I need them, I'll definitely find you to borrow talismans. Since they spoke in a vague manner, I naturally didn't leave any traces behind in my reply. I only said that I would be in the future and didn't give them a specific answer. I did my best not to offend anyone. Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun looked at me in unison. Then, they naturally pushed this matter to the side and changed the topic to Lu Zhenyang. Zhang Kunlun was the first to speak. Last time at the Young Phoenix gathering, Brother Zhou won the title of Young Phoenix with his 4 meridians. Brother Han and I were also sincerely convinced. Only that brat from the Lu family, who usually doesn't learn anything and is also sinister and ruthless, actually managed to open 3 meridian talents. This makes me feel bad, but that brat's luck is really good. In just a short year, I heard that not only did he reach the great completion of the pressing of meridians, he even learned the Lu family's purple myrtle astral step. His current strength is comparable to the seniors of the Glory of Knowledge stage. If Brother Zhou meets him in this competition, you have to be careful. I was startled. Purple myrtle astral steps? Didn't they say that when one reached the Glory of Knowledge stage, they would be able to use the astral steps? Lu Zhenyang was clearly at the great completion of the pressing of meridians. How was that possible? I instinctively opened my mouth to ask. This time, the one who replied was Han Wennan. He said calmly, "In the pressing of meridians realm, there is indeed no star power in the body. However, as long as you comprehend the star power, you can use the star power in the obsidian stone to use the astral step." The Lu family was huge, and they naturally didn't lack obsidian stones. It wasn't strange for Lu Zhenyang to be able to use the astral step. That wasn't much. I heard that Lu Zhenyang had completely grasped the Lu family's inherited equipment, which was the seals that he used at the Young Phoenix gathering. At that time, Lu Zhenyang's abilities were weak, so he wasn't able to use the full power of the inheritance seals. But now I heard that he had already grasped all 7 seals. When used together, their power would be boundless. If Brother Zhou really meets him, you must not be careless. After hearing his words, I was even more astonished. In just a short year, he had done so many things. It seemed that Lu Zhenyang's innate talent wasn't simple. Previously, when I broke his arm, it might have helped him to calm his mind and completely reveal his innate talent. Just like what Zhang Kunlun had said, innate talent was something that couldn't be determined. Han Wennan could be said to be a cultivation maniac, and his family's inheritance was extremely illustrious. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was favored by the heavens. However, his innate talent was only at 1 meridian with 8 apertures. Lu Zhenyang seemed to be ignorant and incompetent. The Lu family's inheritance couldn't be compared to the Han family's, but he had unlocked 3 meridians innate talent. Not only that, he had even comprehended the star power. It could be said that the glory of knowledge was at his fingertips. Just based on this point, Lu Zhenyang had left me far behind. My expression turned solemn as I thanked Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun. Since the Han and Zhang families had the intention to rope me in, it was impossible that they didn't know about the grudge between me and the Lu family. The two of them seemed to be chatting, but in actual fact, they were intentionally revealing Lu Zhenyang's background to me. Although they had purposely sold this favor to me, a favor was still a favor. I was still very grateful. At that moment, the people from the metaphysical aristocratic family and the metaphysical association had arrived at the venue. The drawing of lots was about to begin. We didn't say anything else and returned to our seat. I didn't know if it was the will of the heavens, but the results of the drawing of lots were quickly announced. The one I met was coincidentally Lu Zhenyang. In the other 2 groups, Han Wennan met Su Kuan from the Su family of Jinling. In the last group, Lianqing met Zhang Kunlun. In the first round, there might have been strong and weak confrontations, but in the second round, everyone's strength was rather outstanding. Every group was a battle between the strong. It was different from the day before. The first group today was Han Wennan and Su Kuan, while the second group was Lianqing and Zhang Kunlun. Lu Zhenyang and I, on the other hand, were in the last group. After the drawing of lots, Han Wennan and Su Kuan stayed on the platform to fight, while I returned to the seats below. I randomly picked a seat and sat down, quietly watching the fight. In the recent period of time, I have experienced many battles, but it is strange that there are almost no people of the same realm fighting me. Instead, they are all in the glory of knowledge realm. Although a strong opponent was good for me to sharpen myself, it also caused me to be unable to understand the strength of an opponent in the same realm. Just like when Zhang Kunlun told me that Lu Zhenyang could use the astral steps, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have known that the pressure point realm could borrow the power of the obsidian stones to use the astral step. If Lu Zhenyang suddenly used it during the battle, I would be shocked and might have been defeated by him. In a battle, strength was important, but the preparation work of knowing oneself and one's enemy was equally important. So, being in the last group today was a good thing. I could seriously observe Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun's strength. When we were chatting just now, the two of them kept praising Lu Zhenyang's growth in the past year, but didn't mention me at all. However, I understood that the families behind the two of them could be said to be the oldest and most profound family in the metaphysics world. In the past year, if they said that their improvement was less than Lu Zhenyang's, I wouldn't believe it. It was just like what Han Wennan had said when he tried to rope me in after the Young Phoenix gathering. The road of cultivation didn't only look at talent and hard work. Sometimes, resources were more important than these two. These metaphysics families had been established for thousands of years. Whether it was cultivation methods, magic tools, cultivation experience, or other aspects, their resources far surpassed that of ordinary people. Take Han Wennan for example. He and Zhou Yu both had 8 apertures in one meridian, but I didn't need to compare to know that even 2 Zhou Yus wouldn't be Han Wennan's match. This was also without the help of external forces. If it was a competition of external forces, with Han Wennan's attitude of not taking the golden talisman seriously, perhaps even 10 Zhou Yus or 100 Zhou Yus wouldn't be his match. It was precisely because of these advantages that the people of metaphysics families could walk further on the road of cultivation. Moreover, the higher the level of cultivation, the more their advantages would manifest. Chapter 252. After thinking about it seriously, I still couldn't make up my mind. My personality wasn't too lazy and free, but after being alone for a long time and joining a metaphysics family, it was hard to avoid feeling like I was being controlled by others. Many things would become out of my control. Moreover, I had too many secrets. It wasn't a big deal in a loose organization like the Metaphysics Association, but once I joined a metaphysics family, I couldn't guarantee that my secrets wouldn't be exposed. After thinking for a long time, I finally suppressed this matter and waited for the competition to end. I would first reach the glorious knowledge realm before thinking about it. At this time, the battle between Han Wennan of the Han family in Qinling Mountains and Su Kuan of the Su family in Jinling had already begun. Both of them were well-known families with profound heritage. It was said that their talents in the baptism of dragon aura were almost the same. Therefore, they thought it would be a well-matched battle. Unexpectedly, as soon as the battle began, Su Kuan vomited blood and was defeated by Han Wennan with only one step. Then, he admitted defeat without any hesitation. At first, I was stunned. Jinling Su family was one of the famous families. Not to mention scarlet talismans, it wouldn't be strange for them to use a few silver talismans. Who knew that Su Kuan didn't use any? However, after thinking about it, the metaphysics families should know each other's background. Su Kuan probably knew Han Wennan's background very well and didn't want to take the risk of getting injured by making these useless attempts. After quickly ending the first battle, Zhang Kunlun and Li Enqing of the Metaphysics Association walked up the stage from both sides without waiting for others to come out. The second battle officially began. I was even more interested in this duel than in the first one. It was true that Han Wennan was strong, but we had already fought at the Young Phoenix gathering, so I knew a bit about him. However, this Zhang Kunlun had always been mysterious. At the Young Phoenix gathering, he had a talent of 2 meridians and 2 apertures, which wasn't much worse than Lu Zhenyang. However, most of the people who participated in the Young Phoenix gathering remembered my fight with Lu Zhenyang and Han Wenan's unsatisfactory innate talent. Only a few people would remember Zhang Kunlun, who was ranked third. This fatty who always had a smile on his face was too low-key. People couldn't help but ignore him. They felt that he wasn't outstanding, so they didn't pay much attention to him. But in reality, as the legitimate son of the Zhang family of Mount Mang, this smiling fatty was perhaps the most dangerous person. As soon as the battle began, Zhang Kunlun's actions startled me. This fellow didn't have any intention of using his strength to fight. He directly took out several scarlet talismans and threw them at Lianqing. I was dumbfounded. From the looks of it, this fellow didn't want to reveal his strength yet. He just wanted to use the talisman to solve the problem. As a participant from the metaphysics world, I couldn't help but feel pity for Lianqing. That fellow had a sallow face and wouldn't stand out in a crowd. However, in reality, his power wasn't ordinary. In the first round, he didn't even use a scarlet talisman. With just his own power, he managed to withstand several scarlet talismans from Xiangyang's Lu family's direct descendant, Lu Shibin, and finally won. At that time, it caused quite a commotion and many people remembered his name. The people from the metaphysics world probably had high hopes for him. Unfortunately, he met an unreasonable person like Zhang Kunlun. Yesterday, Lu Shibin had only used a few scarlet talismans, so he could barely withstand them. But today, Zhang Kunlun could probably smash him to death with his talismans. With a pessimistic mood, I continued to watch the battle. However, as the battle continued, my eyes opened wider and wider. Zhang Kunlun had used 7 or 8 scarlet talismans in one go. Moreover, they were all extremely powerful talismans. But Lianqing still didn't use any scarlet talismans and relied on his own power to block them. I asked myself if I could rely on the 4 apertures of Dao Qi in my body, the dark green energy, and the 2 divine incantations to block the scarlet talismans. But Lianqing didn't have these conditions. What did he rely on to do all that? Not only was I shocked, but the audience below the stage also sat up straight. Countless eyes stared at Lianqing, wanting to see how far he could endure. Even President Gu and Lu Zining, who were at the Celestial Master Realm, were the same. The audience below the stage was shocked, but Zhang Kunlun, who was on the stage, was stunned. He was stunned for a while, then he reached out to touch his body. I thought that he was finally going to take out his magic tool to fight with Lianqing since the scarlet talismans didn't work. However, I didn't expect him to take out a silver talisman. The entire venue let out a regretful sigh. Lianqing's ability to do this made everyone have hope in him. However, Zhang Kunlun's actions were really too much of a bully. It was fine if he was weak, but he was clearly very strong. Yet, he wanted to borrow external power. It was really incomprehensible. Zhang Kunlun didn't care about the opinions of the audience. He flipped his hands and infused his Dao Qi into the silver talisman. In a flash, the silver talisman emitted a bright light. After it rose into the air, it turned into a small white flame. It looked like a ghostly white flame, but even though I was sitting far away from them, I could feel the endless heat from the small flame. From the looks of it, this was just an ordinary scorching sun talisman. However, the power of a silver talisman that could only be made by a celestial master was not something that could be estimated by ordinary people. It had forcefully turned the original Yang Qi fireball into this terrifying white flame. Although this burning sun talisman was the weakest of the silver talismans, I didn't need to look to know what would happen to Lianqing. He could only jump off the stage and admit defeat. This kind of silver talisman contained the power of a celestial master. It wasn't something that a perfected acupoint sealing realm cultivator could deal with. Even I couldn't do it. However, Lianqing's choice was beyond my expectations. He didn't retreat and admit defeat. Instead, he took out the scarlet talisman that Yang Shilong had given us today. After quickly receiving Dao Qi, he drew out 9 wisps of terminus Qi to protect himself. Seeing his choice, I shook my head slightly. The terminus Earth talisman was one of the most powerful of the scarlet talismans, while the burning sun silver talisman was one of the weakest of the silver talismans. The two seemed to be about the same, but just like how 10 cultivators of the glorious knowledge realm weren't a match for a celestial master, the difference between the scarlet talisman and the silver talisman was too great. I still didn't think that he would win. Reality didn't exceed my expectations. The white flame that was triggered by the burning sun silver talisman approached Li Enqing unhurriedly. When it reached him, although it was slightly blocked by the terminus Earth Qi, the terrifying temperature almost instantly evaporated the 3 wisps of terminus Earth Qi in front of his chest. Following that, the terminus Earth talisman was rather miraculous. The other 6 wisps of terminus Earth Qi automatically floated in front of him in an attempt to block the white flame. However, the result wasn't ideal. The 6 wisps of terminus Earth Qi only consumed a portion of the white flame's power. After all the Earth terminus Qi had disappeared, there was still more than half of the white flame remaining. It continued to float towards Li Enqing's body at a moderate speed. I could even see that the ends of his eyebrows and hair were slightly curled up from the heat. At this moment, he could only admit defeat. Under the power of the burning sun silver talisman, if Li Enqing didn't retreat and admit defeat, he might even perish on the spot. However, his thoughts were obviously different from mine. Not only did Li Enqing not admit defeat, he took out the merit summoning talismans that the Metaphysics Association had given us yesterday. Furthermore, he used 2 of them in one go. Thanks to the burning sun silver talisman's slow speed, Li Enqing quickly received the Dao Qi. The Dharmakayas of the 2 merit officials on duty instantly appeared on the arena. They stood there expressionlessly with dull faces. They didn't react at all to the white flame nearby. Similarly, they didn't react to Li Enqing, who had summoned them. Although the talisman could summon the heavenly official, it was only a Dharmakaya. It didn't have any intelligence. It was rumored that only the golden talisman could summon the heavenly official's true body. As for Li Enqing, after summoning the Dharmakayas of the 2 merit officials on duty, he suddenly took out a scarlet talisman paper and a huge weasel hair brush. He held the talisman paper in one hand and the weasel hair brush in the other. He actually started writing on the spot. From the looks of it, he was actually making a talisman. Although the speed of the white flame was slow, it was already approaching his body. Even his clothes were starting to turn black from the heat. However, after Li Enqing leisurely wrote a few strokes, he suddenly reached out and threw the scarlet talisman paper onto the white flame. He shouted loudly, "Where are the merit officials on duty? Quickly report this to the heavens." As he spoke, the 2 merit officials on duty, who had been standing motionless to the side, suddenly moved. Their 4 hands reached out and directly hugged the scarlet talisman paper. At this moment, the talisman paper just happened to wrap around the white flame. After the merit officials on duty hugged it, the scarlet talisman paper actually didn't ignite. Instead, the white flame disappeared into the talisman paper and disappeared from the arena along with the merit officials on duty. Chapter 253. As I widened my eyes, many of the spectators stood up abruptly and stared at Li Enqing with shock written all over their faces. The entire venue was quiet for a few seconds, and then there was a commotion. Everyone's faces were filled with bewilderment after the shock, and they kept discussing with the people around them. Talismans were one of the most common methods in the metaphysics world. This was the headquarters of the Metaphysics Society, and even the weakest among the spectators was a member of the Metaphysics Society. They were all at least in the glory of knowledge realm, and all of them were people who had studied talismans for many years. However, after discussing for so long, the confusion on their faces didn't lessen, but instead increased. Their gazes towards Li Yanqing were filled with respect. Li Yanqing's face was already sallow and sickly. Now, his hair was curled and his clothes were burnt black. He looked even more miserable, but after this battle, no one would dare to look down on him anymore. The discussions below the stage finally quieted down. Zhang Kunlun recovered his usual smile, but no matter how you looked at it, it was a little awkward. Since the outcome of the battle hadn't been decided yet, they naturally had to continue fighting. I thought that Zhang Kunlun would finally take this fight seriously and use his true strength to fight Li Yanqing. However, I didn't expect that this guy would casually take out a silver talisman from his body. He wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He just looked at Li Yanqing with a smile as he fiddled with the silver talisman. It was obvious that he wanted Li Yanqing to back off. Li Yanqing's face was a little green. His way of dealing with the previous silver talisman was indeed shocking, even inconceivable. But this time, he couldn't do it again. At the very least, he only had 2 merit summoning talismans in his hands, and they would be gone after he used them. Facing Zhang Kunlun's second silver talisman, he was completely helpless. Even the spectators couldn't help but sigh, feeling pity for Li Yanqing. In the end, Li Yanqing didn't persist. He cupped his hands towards Zhang Kunlun, admitted defeat, and left the stage. The outcome of the match had been decided, but everyone's attention was focused on the loser, Li Yanqing. No one paid any attention to the victorious Zhang Kunlun. Zhang Kunlun did not care. After putting away the silver talisman in his hand, he leisurely walked down the arena. He was still smiling, and even the slight awkwardness on his face had disappeared. He sat in the seats below the arena, closed his eyes slightly, and closed them to rest. On Li Yanqing's side, after he left the stage, Yang Shilong and the others from the Metaphysics Society went up to him and asked him questions. Although I couldn't hear what they were saying, I didn't need to think to know that they were asking what had happened. How did he use 2 normal red talismans to block a silver talisman? I was also curious. Seeing that Yi Pianpian was also there, I quietly went over. After I went over, Yang Shilong and the others seemed to have gotten the answer from Li Yanqing. They all looked pensive and returned to their seat. I wasn't familiar with the others, so I pulled Yi Pianpian and whispered to her, "What did Li Yanqing say? What was the talisman he just wrote? How could it be so powerful?" Yi Pianpian wore a strange face. The talisman Li Yanqing just wrote was a rain talisman. Her answer was beyond my expectation. It was a rain talisman. This kind of talisman was the lowest grade of Taoist talismans. According to feng shui masters, it was a feng shui talisman. Ordinary feng shui masters who hadn't reached the earth master realm could use it. Nowadays, it was rarely used, but in ancient times, it was one of the most commonly used talismans. Usually, during a drought, people would find a feng shui master or a Taoist priest to set up a sacrificial altar. After performing a ritual, they would draw a rain talisman and burn it, hoping that it would reach the heavens. As for whether it could reach the heavens or not, the person who performed the ritual wasn't sure. Li Yanqing had used an ordinary talisman to block the silver talisman. How was that possible? Looking at my incredulous face, Yi Pianpian didn't wait for me to ask and explained, "Although the rain talisman's grade isn't high, it's a rare symbol that has the power to reach the heavens. Even if an ordinary feng shui master finishes his ritual and burns it, there's still a chance that it can reach the heavenly court." Li Yanqing's acupoint ceiling has reached the consummate realm, and he's also comprehended the power of the stars. The effect of his talisman is naturally stronger. Moreover, he used a scarlet talisman paper and a weasel hairbrush. He even used 2 merit calling talismans to summon the merit officer Dharmakayas on duty. With all these support, it's normal for the merit officer on duty to receive the report. Li Yanqing chose the perfect time. When the merit officer on duty received the report, it happened to envelop the power of the silver talisman. Although the merit officer on duty is only a Dharmakaya and doesn't have enough Taoist energy, after receiving the report, he can directly go to the heavenly court. No matter how strong the power of the silver talisman is, it can't affect this rule. Thus, it wasn't Lianqing's talisman that blocked the power of the silver talisman. Instead, the power of the silver talisman was directly taken away by the merit officers on duty. Yi Pianpian's explanation was very thorough, and I could understand her reasoning after thinking about it for a while. However, I still found it hard to believe. The rain talisman, the memorial to the heavenly court, and the merit officer on duty going straight to the heavenly court after receiving the memorial. It was too unbelievable. After hesitating for a while, I couldn't help but ask Yi Pianpian, although we're cultivators, are the heavenly court and the heavenly court true or false? I was just asking casually, but Yi Pianpian's expression became solemn. She said to me seriously, "Of course it's true. If it's false, how could the merit officer's Dharmakaya be summoned? Where did the power of the rain talisman and the rain talisman go? We're all cultivators, and our highest goal is to raise our yang spirit and become an immortal. If it's false, won't our goal of cultivation be meaningless?" I was stunned by her hurried words, but I quickly understood. This matter was related to the foundation of cultivation. If I didn't think it through, I might have an inner demon when I advanced in the future, which would affect my Tao foundation. Yi Pianpian had seen through this problem, which was why she spoke so fiercely. After thinking it through, I became alert and hurriedly threw my previous thoughts to the back of my mind. I sincerely thanked Yi Pianpian. Yi Pianpian heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that I had noticed this problem. She returned the topic to Lianqing and said, "Although all cultivators dabble in the Tao of talismans, in terms of usage, there is no Taoist talisman faction in the world." I nodded. "That's for sure. Ever since Celestial Master Zhang and Lord Taoist Three Reeds left their orthodoxies, Mount Longhu and Mount Maoshan have been obsessed with the Tao of talismans for 2,000 years. Naturally, they're much stronger than the other factions, whether it's the power or usage of talismans. However, our Metaphysics Association has Lianqing. Not to mention the power of talismans, his usage is not inferior to that of Mount Longhu." After the previous incident, Yi Pianpian and I had a deep prejudice against Mount Longhu. Now that I mentioned it, I subconsciously mocked Mount Longhu. However, Yi Pianpian's face was still very serious. She turned to look at me and said with a frown, "It's not inferior, but it's much more exquisite than Mount Longhu. The Tao of talismans in the world is unique to Mount Longhu." Why did our Metaphysics Association suddenly have Lianqing? The hidden meaning in Yi Pianpian's words startled me. I couldn't help but ask, "You suspect Lianqing?" Yi Pianpian nodded straightforwardly. Although the rain-praying talisman is a feng shui talisman, since ancient times, feng shui masters have never used it as much as Taoist priests. Moreover, this method of using talismans is too magical. I can believe that it's the inheritance of some family that uses talismans, but I can't believe that Lianqing came up with this method by himself. I still found it unbelievable. According to Yi Pianpian, Lianqing was most likely a member of Mount Longhu. But why would Mount Longhu send such a person to the Metaphysics Association? Was it because of the conflict between us and Mount Longhu? Yi Pianpian's identity made them think that the Metaphysics Association wanted to do something to them, so they sent Lianqing to be a spy? Now that I thought about it, it did seem possible. However, I still felt that it was ridiculous. In terms of power and foundation, Mount Longhu wasn't weaker than the Metaphysics Association. Moreover, with its rallying power in Taoism, if the Metaphysics Association really had a conflict with Mount Longhu, all the Taoist sects in the world would join Mount Longhu to besiege the Metaphysics Association. At that time, the Metaphysics Association wouldn't have any chance of winning. With such a great disparity in power, Even if Mount Longhu was suspicious, they could have just gone to their sect to question them. Why would they send a spy? However, Yi Pianpian wasn't stupid. If I could think of it, she could probably think of it as well. So, why would she question me? Before I could figure out the reason, President Gu had returned to the platform and announced the start of the third match. I had to stop my doubts. I pointed at the platform and smiled at Yi Pianpian. Go and investigate. If you need any help, just come to me. I'm going up now. Yi Pianpian nodded. Her frown deepened. After a moment of silence, she said to me, "Then, take care." I grinned at her and didn't say anything else. I walked up to the platform. Yi Pianpian had a cold temperament. There were some things she couldn't say, but I could feel the worry in her heart. In yesterday's competition, the talismans that appeared in everyone's hands were only scarlet talismans. However, today, silver talismans had appeared. Zhang Kunlun had silver talismans, so naturally, Lu Zhenyang also had silver talismans. Moreover, with the Lu family's current popularity, Lu Zhenyang's silver talismans would not be less than Zhang Kunlun's. Although I also had 2 silver talismans that Yi Pianpian had given me, I obviously didn't have more than Lu Zhenyang's group. Yi Pianpian's worry was probably because of this. I felt much more reassured than Yi Pianpian. The fact that Grandfather Li had given me a silver talisman wasn't something that others would think of. Secondly, the power of the 2 silver talismans that Grandfather Li had given me was extraordinary. At the very least, they were much stronger than the one that Zhang Kunlun had just used. Even if Lu Zhenyang had more silver talismans, they might not be as powerful as mine. Apart from that, the most important thing was that the silver talismans contained the power of the Heavenly Master. Although it didn't consume a lot of Tao energy to activate the silver talismans, it was still a lot. In a match, using 2 or 3 silver talismans was already the limit. No matter how many silver talismans Lu Zhenyang had, what was the point if he couldn't use them? Chapter 254. Following President Gu's order, the third match officially began. I stared at Lu Zhenyang and didn't make the first move. I just kept my guard up. Lu Zhenyang didn't seem to be in a hurry. He stood there leisurely and said to me, "You really surprise me again and again. You know that you might meet me in this match, but you still dared to come up. Your courage is commendable." The corner of my mouth twitched. Lu Zhenyang was indeed calm, but his bad habit of not recognizing himself or his opponent hadn't changed. He always felt good about himself. Of course, according to the information provided by Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun, the current Lu Zhenyang had more reason to be arrogant than before. It was just that whether or not it was enough was another matter. I couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. I shook my head and said, "Stop talking nonsense and make your move." Lu Zhenyang's expression became solemn. He took out a seal from his bosom and looked at it. He seemed to be moved as he said, "When we first fought, I used this Mount Tai seal. In the end, I lost to you. Today, I won't use the silver talisman to bully you. I will use this Mount Tai seal. I want to fight you fair and square." His words stunned me. I almost couldn't believe that Lu Zhenyang was going to give up on using the silver talisman. He wanted to use his real strength to fight me? The corner of my mouth twitched. I didn't say anything and just stared at the yellow Mount Tai seal in his hand. During the Young Phoenix Gathering's ranking competition, I had snatched this Mount Tai seal from Lu Zhenyang the first time I fought him. It was only on the day that Lu Zhenyang and Lu Zining killed my parents that he snatched it back. Looking at the Mount Tai seal, I seemed to have returned to that despairing afternoon. My father had been kicked by Lu Zhenyang to the point of vomiting blood. My mother had been busy in the kitchen because of the false hope that Lu Zhenyang had given her. In the end, Lu Zhenyang hadn't let them go. The smile on my face grew even wider, but my eyes grew colder and colder. Lu Zhenyang even told me to have a fair duel. My duel with him would only be a battle of life and death. There would be no exchange of pointers. Fair duel? To deal with him, even the most despicable methods could be called fair and square. I stood there without moving, but the yin-yang yama brush had already appeared in my right hand. As I guided the energy, I waited for Lu Zhenyang to attack. It was almost exactly the same as the first time we fought. Lu Zhenyang seemed to be purposely trying to avenge his humiliation. After he used his right hand to guide the Tao energy, he tossed the Mount Tai seal into the air. It transformed into the shape of a small mountain and smashed down towards me. The Mount Tai seal, which was so weak that it couldn't even withstand a single blow, now displayed its might. Not only did the small mountain increase in size, but the aura it contained was similar to the Mount Tai stone that I had seen in the Shenzhen branch. Majestic true dragon energy coiled around it, bringing with it a suppressive might unique to a magical artifact. It pressed down on me, making me feel like I had nowhere to run. Lu Zhenyang stood there and looked at the power of the Mount Tai seal. He seemed to be satisfied and smiled. I smiled as well. Facing the incoming Mount Tai seal, I stood there without moving. Naturally, I would use the same method to deal with his previous attack. After the Tao energy was guided, the yin-yang yama brush instantly appeared. However, what was different from the previous time was that there were 2 dots in the black and white yin-yang fish pattern. I couldn't tell if they were dark green or black. They were hidden in the yin and yang energy and didn't look obvious. However, if anyone stared at them for a while, they would definitely be shocked by the power hidden within. Not only did I use all the Tao energy in my body, but I also used the dark green energy. If Lu Zhenyang wanted to avenge his humiliation, he would have to ask for my permission. No matter how strong Lu Zhenyang was, he would not be a match for the yin-yang fish with just the Mount Tai seal, which was equivalent to 14 apertures of Tao Qi and 10 apertures of dark green energy. I didn't even look at him. Instead, I slightly turned my head to observe the movements of President Gu and Lu Zhenyang. Nan Gong had said that if the Celestial Master Realm people found out about the dark green energy, they would definitely kill me. Although the dark green energy didn't have the light of knowledge, after absorbing all the power from the black bead, the dark green energy was several times stronger than during the Young Phoenix gathering. Hence, I had to be especially careful when using it. I had to use my full power against Lu Zhenyang to test the waters. Chairman Gu's face was calm. He sat there like a clay puppet, without any expression on his face. Lu Zhenyang's face was filled with worry for Lu Zhenyang. He didn't see anything abnormal. I heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the dark green energy was safe for now. I didn't have to worry about it in the future. My attention returned to the battle. At this moment, the giant yin and yang fish finally collided with the Mount Tai seal. Although the Mount Tai seal turned into a small mountain, it wasn't as big as the spinning yin and yang fish. After the collision, there was no sound. The Mount Tai seal was directly covered by the yin and yang fish. Then, the Mount Tai seal only struggled for a few seconds before it stopped moving. Then, its body shrank and it turned back into a seal. It was obvious that Lu Zhenyang had lost control of the Mount Tai seal. From the start until now, everything was exactly the same as the previous battle. This was what Lu Zhenyang was after. He wanted to recreate the process and pursue a different result. However, it was a pity that the final result was the same as the previous time. At this moment, Lu Zhenyang couldn't maintain the smile on his face anymore. He looked flustered and exasperated as he glared at me. He didn't have any of his previous calmness. I grinned. On the surface, this guy seemed to be much more reserved and calm, but in reality, he hadn't improved at all. Once something happened, he still couldn't control his emotions. Just a small setback would make him look flustered and exasperated. I controlled the yin-yang fish to return in front of me. I extended my hand to retrieve the Mount Tai seal. I waved my hand at Lu Zhenyang and grinned. Brother Lu is too polite. Previously you took the initiative to give me the Mount Tai seal. Now you're giving it to me again. It would be impolite of me to refuse. Upon saying that, I kept the Mount Tai seal on my body. Previously, when I took his magic tool, I was a little worried. However, this time, I didn't hesitate at all. Compared to what I planned to do today, the magic tool was nothing. Lu Zhenyang's expression worsened. He couldn't hide his anger and impatience. However, he still forced a smile and said to me, "Last time, you took my Mount Tai seal. You won't be able to forget the result for the rest of your life. Are you sure you want to do it again?" I had to say that Lu Zhenyang had made progress. At the very least, he had learned how to infuriate others. The smile on my face froze. After a few seconds of silence, I suddenly grinned at him and shook my head. "I do hope that you can do it again. However, there are some things that can't be redone. It's only been a year and you've only made so little progress?" I tried my best to change the topic and erase the scene of my parents' tragic death from my mind. I purposely tried to infuriate Lu Zhenyang. As expected, he was like a bag of dynamite that would explode at the slightest touch. His eyes instantly turned red and he coldly smiled at me. "Don't think that you can suppress me just because you have Zhang Wenfei's magic tool. If you want to see my progress this year, I'll let you see all you want." After saying that, he chanted, 3 steps, 3 steps, 3 steps, 5 traces of you." This was the second time I had heard these words. It was the Lu family's astral steps. Even though Lu Zhenyang had only reached the pinnacle of his acupoint pressing and relied on the obsidian stone to use the astral steps, its power was naturally incomparable to Lu Qingping's. However, I didn't dare to be careless. I put away the yin-yang yama brush and instantly took out the square heavenly fan to block in front of me. Then, I took out the gold light god talisman and the pure yang god talisman from my bosom. After receiving the Tao energy, I used hand seals and incantations to form a golden light wall in front of me. This was my strongest defense technique. When I faced Lu Qingping, I could resist it for a while. Against Lu Zhenyang today, there wouldn't be any accident. This was what I relied on the most when I heard Zhang Kunlun say that Lu Zhenyang could use the purple myrtle astral step. Back then, Lu Qingping could instantly break my 2 incantations, causing my expression to change drastically. However, it was obvious that Lu Zhenyang didn't have that ability today. Even if he had the ability, he didn't have enough star power in his body to squander. For things like obsidian, no matter how extravagant the Lu family was, how much could Lu Zhenyang waste? Moreover, I had already lost my patience to fight against Lu Zhenyang. He wanted to fight me fair and square, but I didn't want to. The only thought in my mind was to end this battle as soon as possible. Thus, after Lu Zhenyang absorbed enough star power from the obsidian stone, he lifted his foot and stepped towards me. I reached into my bosom with my right hand and took out one of the 2 silver talismans that grandfather Li had given me. Chapter 255. No matter what spell or technique it was, its power was traceable. Just like talismans and hand seals, the source of power came from Tao energy. The power of astral steps came from Tao energy and star power. Back then, Lu Qingping was at the intermediate stage of glorious memory and had completely comprehended the astral step. No matter if it was Tao energy or star power, Lu Zhenyang, who had completed his pressure point and used the obsidian stone, couldn't compare to him. Back then, Lu Qingping could break through the golden light incantation with 1 step, but Lu Zhenyang couldn't. After he took a step forward, the outer layer of the square sky fan immediately collapsed. However, the golden halo with a ring of faint red flames didn't even sway as it directly blocked Lu Zhenyang's astral steps. This situation wasn't out of my expectations, so I wasn't surprised at all. However, the spectators below the stage widened their eyes. Many of them even exclaimed in shock. They weren't just shocked by Lu Zhenyang's astral steps at the pressure point realm, they were also shocked by the defensive power of my 2 talismans. Among the spells of the mysterious faction and Taoist faction, let's not talk about the instruments for now. In terms of the power of the spells, the strongest was naturally the incantation. However, the incantation itself was extremely complicated, and it was rather troublesome to use. It required a long period of chanting, and during battle it was very difficult to use it. Only when one reached the Sky Master realm and could use a single-word spell would their true power be displayed. Thus, the strongest spell below the Sky Master realm was the Astral Step. The Astral Steps used the star power at the Glorious Memory realm. Its power was much stronger than the same level talismans and hand seals. In a battle at the Glorious Memory realm, the Astral Steps was the deciding power. With such common sense, when the spectators saw Lu Zhenyang use the Astral Steps, they instinctively thought that I wouldn't be able to block it without the power of the Silver Talisman. It wasn't just them. The reason why Zhang Kunlun and Han Wennan gave me the Silver Talisman was because they emphasized that Lu Zhenyang had comprehended the Astral Step. This meant that they also thought that the Astral Steps couldn't be blocked. However, under everyone's gaze, I didn't use the Silver Talisman and only used the talisman and hand seals to block the attack. Moreover, I seemed to have the upper hand, so it was normal for everyone to be shocked. Of course, my attention wasn't on the stage. Instead, I was secretly holding onto the metal attribute Silver Talisman in my hand. My eyes were fixated on Lu Zhenyang's feet. I had seen the Lu family's Gong use 7 steps before. From start to finish, there were a total of 7 steps. Lu Zhenyang had only taken 1 step. It was too early to say that I had the upper hand. However, when I faced Lu Qingping, my 2 divine talismans were able to last until the end. Today there shouldn't be any surprises. Lu Zhenyang's first step did not seem to work, but his expression was still calm. Without saying anything, he immediately took a second step. He stepped 3 feet in front of the golden ring of flame, and the surging chi of the Wei and the power of the stars came crashing down, but the golden ring of flame only shook slightly, and then calmed down again. Lu Zhenyang's expression changed slightly. Without stopping, he took a 3rd step forward. This time, he advanced another foot. The flames on the golden ring of flames seemed to have encountered a strong gust of wind, and were pressed down by half their heads. The golden ring of light also seemed to have dimmed a little. I had to admit that the power of Lu Zhenyang's astral steps wasn't bad. Even if he wasn't able to display the full power of the Gangyu's 7 steps, there was still hope for him to completely break my 2 divine incantations. However, my attention had already shifted from Lu Zhenyang's feet to his face. I didn't care whether he could break the golden ring of flame or not. What I cared about was when he would reveal an opening. The stronger the astral steps, the more chi of the Wei and the power of the stars would be consumed. After taking 3 steps, beads of sweat were already flowing down Lu Zhenyang's forehead. How much longer could he last? The moment the chi of the Wei in his body was exhausted, it would be the time for me to use the silver talisman in my hand. Lu Zhenyang's expression turned ugly after the successive blows. He only stood there to recuperate before he immediately took his 4th step. This time, he wasn't as steady as before. His right foot crossed a distance of 2 feet and directly stepped on the flaming golden ring, bringing with it a terrifying gust of wind that extinguished the pure yang flames. It even caused the golden light wall to sink by 2 inches, making it look like it was on the verge of collapse. The power of this step was much stronger than the previous 3 steps. However, after taking the step, Lu Zhenyang's face instantly turned pale. His body that was stepping on the golden light wall seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. This was the sign of Qi of the Wei being exhausted. I instantly understood that with Lu Zhenyang's current power, he probably hadn't fully comprehended the Gangyu's 7 steps yet. Hence, he decided to finish it in one go. He wanted to bet all his chi of the way and the power of the stars on this fourth step to completely destroy my golden ring of flame. However, it was a pity that he only completed half of his goal. The pure yang flames were extinguished, but the golden light wall was still there. What was even more unfortunate was that he had used up all his power and hadn't generated any new power yet. He was at his weakest. I focused my gaze, and the chi of the way in my body surged into the silver talisman in my hand. At the same time, I stared at Lu Zhenyang and tried to see if he had any other trump cards. Even though I had the upper hand from the start, I didn't believe that Lu Zhenyang only had this much power. As the son of the Lu family's first wife, he had come here to defeat me. If he only had this much power, then he was too useless. The truth wasn't out of my expectations. Lu Zhenyang, whose face was ashen white, didn't look guilty at all. He took out a small milky white seal from his body and held it in his hand. In an instant, his face turned red once more. Needless to say, that milky white seal had the effect of recovering chi of the way. Looking at its speed, it was much stronger than my true dragon vein. In just a few seconds, his chi had recovered quite a bit. The Lu family's inherited instrument was really magical. I stared at him and didn't react. The silver talisman in my hand was already filled with chi of the way and could be used at any time. However, I forcefully suppressed it and also used the dark green power to cover my palm to prevent the power of the silver talisman from leaking out. I continued to wait for an opportunity. After his chi had recovered, Lu Zhenyang kept the milky white seal and took out two other seals. One was vermilion red and the other was bright white. The two seals didn't stay in his hand for a second and immediately flew out. This time, they didn't become bigger. Instead, they turned into a giant flame blade in the air and slashed at me. Even though Lu Zhenyang was standing on the golden halo, the flame blade had already passed through the halo after he threw the seals. However, the golden light god's incantation had the ability to protect its master. In an instant, the damaged golden halo disappeared and turned into a thin golden light screen in front of me. However, it was a pity that Lu Zhenyang's astral steps had consumed too much of the golden halo's energy. Currently, this thin layer of light only had a small portion of the divine golden light spell's defensive power. It didn't seem to be able to put up any effective resistance before it was sliced into two by the flaming blade. Lu Zhenyang's malicious eyes stared at me. At that moment, he finally revealed a smile. It was as though he could already see the outcome of me being sliced into two by the flame blade. I couldn't deny that Lu Zhenyang's performance today was perfect. Even though he had thrown away the Mount Tai seal at the start, he had successfully consumed a large amount of my chi. After that, he used the astral steps and several instruments consecutively. He had almost forced out all of my trump cards, especially the last few instruments. It was obvious that he had meticulously planned it out. His goal was to fight with me until both of us were exhausted. Then, he would make use of the milky white seal's ability to recover chi to deal the final blow to me. At that moment, the remaining chi in my body had been used to activate the silver talisman. I didn't have any power to resist the flame blade. Lu Zhenyang's plot was about to succeed, but it was a pity that he had missed 2 points. The first point was the square sky fan. The square sky fan was an instrument that Grandfather Li had given to me. It was extremely intelligent and had the ability to automatically protect its owner. During the Young Phoenix gathering, it had automatically appeared and helped me block Lu Zhenyang's attack. This time, even though I had used the square sky fan when Lu Zhenyang had used the first astral steps, I had only used the square sky fan as a method to stall for time. My main defensive preparations were still on the 2 divine incantations that followed. Even though the square sky fan had been destroyed by me during Lu Zhenyang's astral steps, it wasn't damaged. After being nourished in my body, it still had the power to protect its owner. I didn't know if the square sky fan could completely block the flame blade, but with the protection of the square sky fan, at the very least, the flame blade wouldn't be able to kill me. That was enough. As for whether I was injured or not, it didn't matter. The second point that Lu Zhenyang had missed was my attitude. Ever since I had used the 2 divine incantations, I had been standing still. This wasn't because my qi was exhausted and I could only passively defend. On the contrary, passively defending was just an illusion. From the beginning to the end, I had been doing one thing, and that was to find an opportunity to deal a fatal blow. And now, the opportunity that I had been waiting for had finally arrived. Even though Lu Zhenyang's milky white seal recovered qi very quickly, the amount of qi recovered was obviously not much. After using 2 seals at the same time to form the flame blade, his face became deathly pale again. The qi in his body had evidently dried up again. More importantly, he was currently standing on the golden halo with a smile on his face. He was looking straight at me. It was obvious that he felt that he had already won. The old saying wasn't wrong. When one was closest to success, it was often the time when one was most likely to fail. I completely ignored the flame blade that was about to reach me and retracted the dark green energy that was surrounding my palm. The power of the silver talisman that I had been suppressing for a long time was completely released. With lightning speed, it floated into the air and formed a pure silver spear. With lightning speed, it shot towards Lu Zhenyang. Even though the flame blade's speed was fast, it couldn't compare to the silver spear formed by the silver talisman. When the silver spear arrived in front of Lu Zhenyang, the flame blade was still a few feet away from me. Lu Zhenyang didn't even have the time to retract his smile. Chapter 256. As expected of a talisman that could only be created by a heavenly master. The speed of the silver spear was too frightening. It was so fast that no one could react. Only when Lu Zhenyang fell heavily to the ground did the crowd below the stage finally let out a suppressed cry of alarm. Even I was slightly stunned. Lu Zhenyang had been pierced by the silver spear? What happened to his life-saving measures? Before I could figure it out, a scorching aura assaulted my face. The huge flame blade was about to reach me. The square heavenly fan appeared in time and turned into weeds on the lonely grave, blocking between me and the huge flame blade. The lonely grave didn't move, but the weeds grew crazily. In a blink of an eye, they grew more than 10 meters and frantically wrapped around the huge flame blade in an attempt to pull it down. However, the power of the huge blade wasn't ordinary. When the weeds wrapped around it, they were instantly burned to ashes. The huge blade's power even caused the weeds on the lonely grave to collapse. However, in that short instant, the power of the wild grass had caused the huge blade to slightly change its trajectory. In the end, it brushed past my face and shoulder, leaving behind a burn mark. Then, it heavily struck the ground behind me, giving off a loud explosion. The power of the giant blade and the flame, which were completely made of Taoist qi, was incomparable to that of ordinary weapons. Although it only brushed my cheek, it still left a horrible wound on my face. It was so painful that half of my face was almost numb. Although a feng shui master's power was strong, his body was still that of an ordinary person. His resistance wasn't much stronger than a normal person's. However, I didn't care about the pain and immediately looked at Lu Zhenyang. There was only one thought in my mind: is Lu Zhenyang dead? When I glanced at him, I saw that the silver spear had pierced through Lu Zhenyang's body. There was a terrifying hole in his chest. He most likely wouldn't survive. However, I didn't dare to believe it before I confirmed it. Even though today's battle wasn't easy, as Lu Zhenyang and I had to use our wits and strength to win, I still couldn't believe it. Lu Zhenyang and the Lu family were like a huge mountain pressing on my head. In the past, I couldn't sleep at night and couldn't see a sliver of hope for revenge. Today, my dream had come true. When my gaze returned to Lu Zhenyang's body, I noticed that his body was wrapped in a thick cocoon of light. He looked just like Lu Qingping. At that moment, I understood that it wasn't that Lu Zhenyang didn't have any life-saving measures, but the power of the silver talisman had exceeded my expectations. Before Lu Zhenyang's life-saving measures could take effect, the silver talisman had directly injured him. After that, his life-saving light cocoon finally took effect. However, when I looked at Lu Zhenyang, I calmed down a little. It wasn't because I was afraid, but because I could see through the cocoon of light that Lu Zhenyang's heart was still beating inside the big hole in his chest. The silver spear had actually passed through Lu Zhenyang's heart and hadn't killed him. As long as Lu Zhenyang didn't die, with the power of the Lu clan, they would be able to bring him back to life. However, this was also good. With the diameter of the big hole, Lu Zhenyang's veins in the sky had been destroyed. Feng Shui masters at the pressure point realm would store their Tao energy in the veins of the sky. Even if Lu Zhenyang came back to life, he would only be a cripple. This result made me sigh. Originally, I only had the intention of crippling him. Now that I had accidentally stumbled upon it, the result was really the same as what I had imagined. I didn't care about Lu Zhenyang anymore. I turned around and looked at Lu Zining, who was below the stage. I had made Lu Zhenyang look like this. With the Lu family's temperament, they wouldn't let this go. At this moment, Lu Zining was still sitting in his seat. His eyes were lifeless as he stared blankly at Lu Zhenyang. Only when I looked at him did Lu Zining seem to regain consciousness. His gaze slowly shifted to my body. Then, his eyes turned scarlet at a speed visible to the naked eye. He abruptly stood up from his seat and squeezed out a few words. "Brat, you're courting death." Following his voice, I felt a heavy blow to my chest. I spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. I crashed into the wall behind me before falling down. My mind was in a state of blackness. When I struggled to lift my head to look down, Lu Zining was already walking towards the rostrum step by step. I was shocked. I thought that this was the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. Even if I killed Lu Zhenyang, the Lu family would have some misgivings. At the very least, they would wait until I left the Metaphysics Association before attacking me. I didn't think that Lu Zining would attack me so brazenly. What should I do? Gramps promised to protect me, but where was he now? Even if he rushed over, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. Before I could figure it out, the skinny President Gu, who always had a kind face, suddenly appeared in front of me. He blocked Lu Zining, who was already on the rostrum, and said calmly, "This is the Metaphysics Association. Lu Zining, don't act recklessly." Lu Zining's footsteps came to a halt, but the scarlet in his eyes did not recede at all. He turned his gaze to President Gu and said coldly, "President Gu, don't speak nonsense. This brat killed a direct descendant of the Lu clan. He deserves death. In a battle, life and death are up to fate. If you want to cause trouble because of this, it won't be justifiable." President Gu said calmly. "Ha ha ha." Lu Zining laughed loudly. His expression became even colder as he continued, "Cause trouble?" Just now on the stage, the two of us agreed that we wouldn't use the silver talismans and that we would fight based on our own abilities. This little bastard didn't keep his word and secretly used the silver talisman to harm my grandson's life. Let me ask you, who is the one causing trouble? President Gu was speechless and became silent. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, I struggled to get up and said loudly, "Lu Zhenyang did suggest that, but I didn't agree. How can you say that I didn't keep my word?" Lu Zining suddenly turned his head. "Shut up. You have no right to speak here." Following his words, another violent wave of Tao energy came. Fortunately, President Gu waved his sleeves and blocked the Tao energy in Lu Zining's voice, so I wasn't seriously injured. President Gu shook his head. His voice was clearly trying to persuade me. He said, "It's a life and death battle on the stage. How can there be a verbal agreement? Moreover, Lu Zhenyang was only injured and didn't die. It's more important to save him. We can discuss this later. Lu Zining didn't seem to notice Lu Zhenyang's situation in his rage. When he heard President Gu's words, he turned his head to take a look and hurriedly ordered people to carry Lu Zhenyang away. However, he still stood there without moving. After the Lu family took Lu Zhenyang away, Lu Zining said to President Gu, "Zhenyang has a quasi-3 meridian talent. He's the most talented junior in our Lu family in recent years. He's also the favorite of my elder brother. He's already decided to groom Zhenyang to be the next family head. If the Metaphysics Association doesn't give us an explanation for today's matter, our Lu family won't let this matter go." His words were extremely rude. President Gu's tone changed as he asked coldly, "What do you want?" Lu Zining said, "Our Lu family isn't unreasonable. We won't hold the Metaphysics Association responsible for what happened on the stage. However, you have to hand this little bastard over to our Lu family to deal with." President Gu was silent for a moment. What if the Metaphysics Association doesn't want to hand him over? Don't want to hand him over? Lu Zining didn't have any intention of backing down. "If you don't hand him over, our Lu family will withdraw from the Metaphysics Association. Lu Liang's Lai family and the Metaphysics Association's branches in Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei will also withdraw from the Metaphysics Association." As soon as he finished speaking, most of the people in the venue had a drastic change in expression. The meaning behind Lu Zining's words was very clear. The Lu Liang Lai family, the capital, Tianjin, and Hebei branches were all puppets of the Lu family. If these forces were added together, it would be at least a small portion of the Metaphysics Society's power. Lu Zining's words were a blatant threat. President Gu fell silent. After a long while, he said with difficulty, "I'm afraid it's not up to you to decide the Lu family's matters, right?" As soon as he finished speaking, a cold and ethereal voice came from outside the venue. "His meaning is the Lu family's meaning." Everyone in the venue turned their heads at the same time and looked in the direction of the entrance. Following the voice, a skinny old man in a black robe with a long beard walked in step by step from the entrance. His steps weren't fast, but it only took him 2 or 3 steps to reach the rostrum from the entrance and stand in front of President Gu. After he stood still, he said, "Other than the conditions I just mentioned, if the Metaphysics Association doesn't hand over the person, our Lu family will join the Taoist Association from tomorrow onwards." I stared at the skinny old man and felt bitter in my heart. I didn't even need to ask to know that this person was the Lu family's master, Lu Ziyang. The Lu family was in Beijing and was very close to the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. It wasn't surprising that Lu Ziyang rushed over after receiving the news. What was surprising was that his determination to force the Metaphysics Association was stronger than Lu Zining's. Everyone knew that the Metaphysics Association and the Taoist Association had always been competitors. The Taoist Association and the Taoist Association had always been close. All these years, the Taoist Association had been suppressed by the Metaphysics Association because the Taoist Association's main power was in the large sections. However, if the Lu family were to join the Taoist Association, the Metaphysics Association might not be a match for the Taoist Association. President Gu remained silent for a long time and didn't say a word. He turned to look at me and left without saying a word. Lu Zining's face revealed a sinister smile. He waved his hand and shouted coldly, "Bring that little bastard back!" As he said that, the Lu family members who had been waiting at the side walked towards me. At that moment, Yi Pianpian suddenly walked over from the side and stood in front of the Lu family members. When the 2 Lu family members saw this, they extended their hands to push Yi Pianpian away. However, before they could do anything, Yi Pianpian waved the green bamboo flute in her hand and pushed them far away, causing them to fall on the ground. I instantly became anxious. The Liu family members had obviously gone crazy. Even President Gu couldn't protect me, so what could Yi Pianpian do? She even attacked the Liu family members. Lu Zining and Lu Ziyang wouldn't let her go. In a moment of desperation, I was about to stand up, but I was surprised to find that Lu Zining and Lu Ziyang's brows furrowed. Lu Ziyang waved his hand, blocking the two members of the Liu family who were about to stand up and attack Yi Pianpian. He said in a serious tone, "Miss Yi, this has nothing to do with you." Yi Pianpian didn't seem to realize what kind of danger she was facing. A smile appeared on her cold face. She said, "This has nothing to do with me, but it's related to my grandfather. Zhou Yi is my grandfather's new disciple. If you want to take him away, you'll have to ask my grandfather first." Lu Ziyang's expression obviously changed. After a long silence he said, "Miss Yi, you can't joke about this. I've never heard of the old president accepting a disciple." The smile on Yi Pianpian's face didn't change at all. "Of course I'm not joking. I'm just telling you the news. Now that you know the news, it's up to you whether you want to take Zhou Yi away or not." After saying that, she turned and left the rostrum, leaving Lu Ziyang and Lu Zining standing there. After a few minutes of silence, Lu Ziyang turned to look at me and squeezed out a word with difficulty. "Go!" You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.